Welcome to The Big Picture, a show that takes a deep dive into the political landscape of not only America, but right here in our own backyard of Illinois.
It's showtime, folks.
The Big Picture is on WCPT 820. And now, here's your host, Edwin Eisendrath.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Big Picture with Edwin Eisendrath. My name is William Muck, and I'm filling in for Edwin today. Many of you know me. I'm a political science professor from North Central College, and I'm joined by my co-host and fellow political science, Joel Ostrow. Hey, welcome, Joe. I'm so excited to be here with you today.
Thanks, Bill. Likewise. Yeah, I'm Joel Ostrow. I'm a political science professor at Benedictine, and like Bill, we're often on the air with Joan Esposito. We have some overlapping areas of expertise as well.
Absolutely.
Why don't you go first?
Well, yeah, so we both study international politics. I do a lot of U.S. foreign policy, military interventionism, democracy development. Joel, you're Russia. You do all sorts of stuff.
Yeah. Well, started out Russian politics, and during the time of the collapse of the USSR and their attempt to build a democracy, my expertise was Russia, but also how you build democratic institutions and create democracy. And then with the rise of Putin, I became expert on how democracy fails, what the requirements are for a successful one, but then, of course, now, sadly, on dictatorship and fascism. So,
and it's funny how studying those things in Russia suddenly become very relevant to what's happening in the United States today. Some of those same patterns play out. So we may be experts in international stuff, but they're very relevant for domestic politics these days.
The sad part is how relevant it's become. I used to get teased by one of my siblings during Trump's first administration because I would post on social media, this is the standard playbook, and I was referencing everything I saw with Putin's rise and what I learned about the rise of other dictators and fascists in history. So it's
one of those things where political scientists for years have been talking about this and ringing the democracy bell. And I think the world is just now finally catching up to the nature of the threat. So
absolutely.
Yeah. Well, we have a fantastic show lined up. We've got a number of guests. Why don't you, Joel, you want to start? You lined up two really exciting guests. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what we're going to talk about later?
Yeah, thanks. At 1:30, we're going to be joined by a gentleman named Reed Bible. He's a former ICE agent in the Chicago area and supervisor of ICE agents. He's retired. I honestly can't tell you. He's been retired for a few years. He lives out of state now, but he is let's just say quite critical of what is going on now. And hopefully he can shed some light on both, like, a little bit maybe what the history of ICE was because they were always controversial, right? Yeah. And what they were supposed to do, what they're doing, and maybe how they interface with police, and I'm hoping what police are doing and are supposed to be doing.
All the way down to the local level of what we're seeing in Chicago. I think that's 100%. Really relevant,
And then at 2:30, we have someone who I was fortunate enough to have on the podcast I host with Brian Endless, the World Discord podcast, a former student of Brian's, a former student of Bill's. Rima Ziuraitas, who is now a certified combat medic serving in Ukraine at the front. She has an incredible story. She's an incredible human. And she's, for a while now, been training combat medics in Ukraine, saving lives every day.
Amazing work.
She's really amazing.
Yeah, no, I think it's going to be such an interesting look at on the ground. We have these big level conversations about Ukraine, but this will be a really micro level look at that. And then at 3:00, we have Kathy Tolan from, she's the chair of Indivisible Chicago Alliance, so the local chapter for Indivisible. And we're going to have lots of a wide ranging conversation with her talking about democracy. And we'll probably hit on ICE and how they understand those dynamics, the way in which we protest and push back against the Trump administration. I think that's going to be a really great conversation. Yeah. And then for the last half an hour, 3:30 to 4, we'll open up the phone lines and we can talk with you about all of these things. So it's going to be a fun conversation.
Sure will.
Well, all right, we got a little time before we get to our first guest. Yes, we were thinking, kind of reflecting on the week's news, what has happened. And before we went on air, you and I were talking about that Epstein and conspiracy theories have sort of been the big news of the week. And Trump this great propagator of conspiracy theories finally finds himself caught up in one. Yeah. But also other things that are going on, whether we're talking about the media capitulation or the deal with Columbia University. And you were saying that you see a connection between a lot of these issues and that oftentimes we discuss them separately, but there's value in thinking about the interconnectedness. You want to kind of share what you were thinking there? So
what I have learned experiencing it when I was in Russia when Putin came to power, and then reading about whether it was the rise of Mussolini in Italy or of Hitler in Germany, fascists consolidate power by overwhelming society. We're talking overwhelming it politically, overwhelming the mediascape, overwhelming activists by flooding society with outrage after outrage in every sector, and it doesn't necessarily divide, but it foils the ability of those who would be defenders of democracy and freedom, of the ability to focus, because what's happening is not Epstein, it's not attacks on academics, it's not attacks on journalists, it's not, you get the idea. It is destroying our institutions and democracy and consolidating dictatorship. That's what the thing is. And by flooding with outrage after outrage after outrage, we're human. Yep. And we're outraged by the outrage, and we want to talk about those. So it becomes difficult. And it used to be, when politics was slower, there would be one issue, right? So we would spend a week or two discussing Columbia. Cigar. Right, exactly. Right. And there was time to sort of have some nuance and depth to that conversation, but we can't. I mean, Steve Bannon all the time uses that phrase, flooding the zone. That's it. And so this is not an accident. It's a real strategy to overwhelm us with all of these executive orders, the outrage, and even the Epstein thing to some degree is still distracting us from these broader conversations. And I get the sense that Trump himself as an individual feels on the defensive, but the administration is still using this as a sort of filler and to distract us from some of the other things that are going on. And this isn't new. You're right. I still view Stephen Miller as the brains and strategist behind this, and there are others, but they tried this in the first administration, but Miller was the only one, and there were still, we used to refer to adults in the room. Adults in the room, yes. And we didn't like those adults, but we still saw them as adults. We didn't like them politically. The left, saw these guys, General Kelly was nuts, but he was still an adult nut. Yeah. Mattis was nuts, but he was an adult nut. All those people it's just the nuts now. It's just the ones who want to destroy the institutions we have. And so they're able to do this flooding without being impeded internally against it. And that's the frightening part. It really is. And the previous administration, those adults in the room, they still believed in democracy. Yeah. And that, I think, we're in a very different place now. We're this week, the chair of the FCC, this whole Paramount merger that's going on and the way in which politics has inserted itself in CBS and all of that, whether we're talking about Colbert or 60 Minutes or CBS News, the law settlements, all of that, the Fed chair, FCC chair was saying this is part of remaking the media landscape in the United States. This is part of the strategy to say we don't want independent outlets pushing back. We want to control the nature of the conversation, the discourse, all of that, which you're absolutely right, fits the pattern of other anti-democratic authoritarian regimes. But let's remember, right, this thing with Paramount. Yeah. It's the second capitulation by CBS, essentially. Right. And let's remember, ABC capitulated. Yep. The Washington Post has been purchased by the far right. Yes. And even it was really shocking to me when Trump gave that speech. I think it was in St. Louis. It was a few weeks ago. It was a rambling, unhinged speech. And you could look at, I think it was The Independent, published the transcript of the word salad, and then you would look, and next to it you could see the New York Times, which had pretended he gave a normal speech. So even the mainstream media has capitulated by normalizing the insanity.
We sane wash all of this. And yes, I mean, even you think about the Wall Street Journal this week, which, good on them for trying to push back a little bit. But Trump is going after with the major lawsuits, trying to intimidate. And unless you're the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times, you don't have the deep pockets, the lawyers to defend against that. Any sort of small media outlet would be crushed with somebody like Trump. I mean, it really is a scary place to be.
But I feel like, Fox, of course, paid that huge settlement, but I think even the Wall Street Journal settled a suit with Trump at one point.
I think, yeah.
So nobody's clean,
right?
And there's right. This is what happens when you have a desire by those in power to rule by fear, to enforce arbitrary rule.
Fear is the right word, because you're seeing that permeate in all aspects, whether we're talking about the media, even Republicans themselves. The Congress as a whole is afraid. I think about, we're both in higher ed.
I was thinking the same thing.
And you can feel at colleges and universities, you can feel that fear of what's going to happen. We're both relatively small schools, and the last thing you want is to suddenly be targeted by the administration. And we even think about, if we show a certain film or we bring a speaker in, are we going to draw the attention of the administration? And they can make life very, very difficult. We see this with Harvard and we see this with Columbia, that sense of being afraid all the time.
And the Harvard and Columbia is not about Harvard and Columbia.
No.
It's about North Central College,
exactly.
Benedictine University, right? Because how are our sorts of institutions, our presidents, our leaders, how are they supposed to stand up to the federal government when Harvard and Columbia are cutting hundreds of millions of dollar deals? We don't have the we become fodder and hostage to whatever the administration wants to do in the education realm. That's an attack on academic freedom. It's an attack on academic and scientific research. It's an attack on truth and information. Truth and information, transparency are the enemies of fascism.
Well, this is the same argument we think about the media, right?
It's all the same thing.
These all interconnect. The reason you need an independent media that feels comfortable pushing back is the same reason you need colleges and universities, so you can have these uncomfortable conversations, challenge power, put big ideas out there. So that's why the administration targets Columbia and targets Harvard. You send this message to everybody else to be afraid. And on our campus, you can feel that fear among faculty and among administrators. They're worried about what's this next 5 to 10 years going to look like.
Whereas 9 years ago, or whatever it was, starting in 2017, the fear on, I don't know about the fear on our campus, among particularly DACA students, and Muslim students with the whole Muslim ban, right? That was palpable. So it was the students who were and now we have that. But we have plus the institutional fear on top of it.
Yes, it is really something. I was thinking there was somebody was interviewed recently talking about going back to the George W. Bush administration and, Iraq and all of that. But that when people pushed back and criticized the Bush administration, nobody feared about being deported.
We were angry.
Right, we were angry, but it was okay. They were, for all their faults, they allowed that discourse. They allowed the pushback. And again, they engaged in that conversation. But there was never the sense of fear that if I say something, I could be targeted for that. And I don't know how you feel, because you're, again, a podcaster like me, media, in the classroom. There are times now that I worry, if I say something, is that going to show up in the wrong circles? And I think we still do this, but I've never in my life had that sense of fear. And it's there a little bit now.
Yeah, that's interesting, Bill. As you were talking, maybe I should be more fearful. I guess for me, given all the friends that I've lost among journalists and politicians in Russia, it would almost feel like a betrayal to be fearful in the face of that, given what they lost with their lives. I don't know.
No, I think it's important.
I refuse to be fearful, I guess.
This is good. And you got the right approach. But I had a colleague who recently traveled to Canada, and he's outspoken like you and I about these issues. And he said as he was traveling, he had never thought about coming back to the United States, whether somebody would pull him aside. And again, this is a very, very different environment than what we've ever seen before. Maybe let's dive into the Columbia issue a little bit. So they settled with the administration for, what was it? Was it
300 million?
Yeah,
crazy number.
Big number. And now they have argued that they've protected their research funding, which for big institutions, that is a big, big, big deal. And they've retained academic freedom. But at the same time, there are individuals who are going to be monitoring what's going on there. Now, not necessarily what's in the classroom, but whether Columbia is meeting the metrics that the Trump administration establishes for higher education. This is a little concerning.
It's a little unclear who that monitor is going to be and what exactly they're monitoring. What I understand is it's supposed to be a mutually agreeable person. But I'm already skeptical of Columbia and what they will agree to by the fact that they've already agreed to this.
Yeah.
And whoever the person is, anyone there is going to feel like they're being watched. So that has a chilling effect, right? Because there's someone directly there that could either go after them. Are they going to go after them individually? Are they going after grants? Are they going after the university as a whole? Are they going to be going after students who are working under them?
Right.
What are they monitoring and to what end? What will the consequences be? We know one thing, Bill. Those consequences will not be good.
Right. And even when Columbia gets this deal, there's no promise that Trump won't change that. I mean, that's one thing we've seen.
We know about Trump.
Right. Whether it's the law firms or whoever it is, they will come to some agreement until he decides he wants to renegotiate that agreement.
It's arbitrary rule.
100%, right? Which is, again, classic sort of authoritarian tactics. And I wouldn't be surprised if Harvard comes out and announces a similar deal. They also apparently are in conversation with the administration. I know in higher ed, many of us were hoping that Harvard would be the one to fight the fight, that they have the deep pockets. They have the access to lawyers. They can make these constitutional arguments. And
it becomes harder for them now, right? Because Columbia.
Yes. And so then if they don't fight that fight,
then we can't.
No, there's no way. That's not possible.
Right?
Yeah.
And I keep asking, so they have a lot of government grants. There's no doubt. Both of those universities. But the endowments that they have dwarf the amount of those grants. Yeah. The interest that they earn on those endowments, forget the principal, could cover most of it.
Yes.
And they could dip into that principal for decades before running out. And is not that what an endowment is for emergency, for crisis, to defend the institution? So if I'm a donor, what the hell did I give that money for if they're not going to use it in a crisis and emergency to defend the university?
To defend its principles, what it stands for. I mean, all schools have these mission statements, and it's not just about appeasing the government. It's about doing really deep and important things for the country, for the demos, for research, all of that.
They treat these endowments as if we can never dip into it. But then why do you have it?
Right.
It can't be never.
Right.
But Harvard is still Harvard. Yeah. Whether informally or whatever, if Harvard were to take a principled stance, they would have other universities with them. And I feel like other universities are hoping for that. My alma mater, Wesleyan University, President Roth, from the very start, made very clear, we're not negotiating, we're not capitulating, we'll take care of ourselves if we have to. But they're small.
Yeah.
And I think Wesleyan was hoping that their peer institutions and going into places like Brown would join, and they haven't. But President Roth made another statement after Columbia's condemning Columbia, but we need more courage like that.
It's a classic, in political science, we talk about collective action problems. This is a classic collective action problem. Together, colleges and universities, or together law firms, together the media can push back against.
Together protest groups. I want to talk to Kathy about that later. Why are we seeing such fragmentation rather than a mass movement like Governor Pritzker called for?
Absolutely. Yeah. When you get these big movements, suddenly, even in quasi-authoritarian systems, you have the ability to push back. But what the authoritarian wants to do is the divide and conquer. And so, again, that's why you target these big institutions early on. And if they can't push back, it makes it much easier to mow down everybody else. So, and
it's dangerous to try to mobilize or become successful at mobilizing mass movement. Who in Russia, right, was most successful? Like Putin attacked and destroyed the donors, funders, and organizers, but Navalny still had this charisma and this enormous following and an incredible team of investigators to expose wrongdoing. He had a mass movement. They murdered him with no consequence. Right. You need leaders to have a mass movement, and that's really where I see the failure here. I don't know about you, but such disappointment.
You're telling me Chuck Schumer isn't doing that for you?
Chucky Schumer, Barack and Michelle Obama, don't boo, do something. And I ask, what the heck are they doing? Mm-hmm. They've been silent. The Kennedys have basically been silent. The Clintons have been. What are they scared of? Like, they're the ones who need to be the Navalny here and to gather this movement. So I'm interested to hear Kathy's take on that later.
No, you're right. Sort of thinking at the lower level of the Democratic Party, you're right. You need somebody to take that lead. Navalny was so good at using social media and YouTube and getting that out and building that movement. And you create some level of protection. But even then, he still ultimately wasn't safe.
Right. And he had friends in media in Russia who, right, Putin's strategy was attack all of his allies and friends, and then you can go after him. So it's frightening.
It is frightening. Well, so this Epstein thing. Do you think this at all hurts Trump? Do you think is this a weak story and we move on? Is there anything at this point that can chip the armor at all? It's sort of fascinating to see him a little bit on the defensive, but ultimately, I think he's sort of Teflon Don, and we'll move on. What's your read of that?
You know, my answer to a question like that changes every day right now. I told you before we went on that I've been reading Tim Snyder's on tyranny, which is a little pamphlet of 20 lessons for preventing the rise of fascism. And the lesson I read about today boils down to the institutions aren't going to save us. Mm-hmm. It's the people who are going to save the people. And we, Democrats, the country, chose the quintessential institutionalist after January 6th, after Trump won. Yep. Joe Biden, and I love him, I respect him, I adore him, but his faith was in our institutions. But our institutions had already failed us. Congress had failed us. The courts had failed us. And so you ask about Epstein. The courts have already ruled that presidents are above the law. Yeah. Congress has already said, no, you can control the purse. We're not going to do oversight. We're not going to do investigations. The security services are already, we're going to talk to Reed in a little bit about how security seems to have been captured by the MAGA regime. So I don't know what will cause the pain to hurt Trump from this Epstein stuff. It's not going to be the institutions. The only pain is going to come from mass protests. I see. I don't know if you agree with this.
No, I think you're spot on, right? The only thing that's sort of interesting to me is to see this bit of a split between the MAGA movement, who cares deeply about this Epstein story and the conspiracy theory, but also their cult-like love for Donald Trump. And now they've been forced to choose it. And I think what Trump's trying to do is to say, no longer believe in the conspiracy theory. Put your
which is really funny.
It is, and again, there is sort of a really funny irony to all of this. He who came to power through conspiracy theories finds himself caught up in one. But ultimately, I think he's going to be able to meander his way out, or he will manipulate the institutions to get there.
Right.
He's already the DOJ official was meeting with Maxwell today or yesterday. Who knows whether she signed some agreement exonerating Trump for a pardon. Right. That's the world that we're in right now, this extra constitutional system where it's all about preserving Trump and not necessarily about the institutions. And again, scary place to be.
Well, and Putin came to power through conspiracy theories, but used violence against those.
You're talking Chechnya, right?
Blew up apartment buildings and then said, you need to, it's terrorism. You need me. It is clear that the FSB and Putin were behind those apartment bombings. And then himself became the target of exposure of conspiracy. But he was able to survive that by attacking those who are exposing actual conspiracies. And we'll see, so far this regime has not resorted to mass violence against the people, but I say yet.
Oh, I think it's there's the kindling for that out there, right? We may see the fire at some point. No, it is. I think you're right. Your earlier point about the interconnectedness of all of this and the patterns that we've seen throughout history and across the world. There's so many things we can look to understand this particular moment. Yeah. Well, Paul, we probably got to get to a break, right? All right, we'll be right back. This is the Big Picture with Edwin Eisendrath, and we're going to come back to talk with Reed Bible about some ICE politics. See you in a second.
You're listening to The Big Picture with Edwin Eisendrath on WCPT 820.
Welcome back to The Big Picture with Edwin Eisendrath. My name is William Muck, and I'm joined by Joel Ostrow. We are just about to have a conversation with Reed Bible about ICE. Before we do so, let me remind everybody that The Big Picture with Edwin Eisendrath has a podcast, two actually, The Big Picture full episodes and The Big Picture featured interviews. You can subscribe to one or both. The podcast is available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, YouTube, Amazon, TuneIn. Just search for The Big Picture with Edwin Eisendrath. Or get the links by visiting theheartlandsignal.com and clicking on Edwin's picture. On that page, you can also find and share Edwin's recent conversation with Indivisible Ezra Levin, wonderful, fascinating guy, North Carolina Democratic Party Chair Anderson Clayton, University Chicago law professor Allison LaCroix, abortion rights activist Amanda Zorinsky, and more. So check all those podcasts out. All right, Joel, who's our next guest?
So I'm really looking forward to this conversation. We have Reed Bible, who is a retired lawyer, but he's a retired ICE supervisory special agent in the Chicago area, and as well as a former member of the Will County Board, hoping to have a wide-ranging conversation with Reed about the role of ICE, past, present, what it was, is supposed to be, should be. So, Reed, thank you for joining us today.
It's my pleasure to be on today, Joel.
So tell us a little bit about your background, if you would, what you did, what your connection with ICE was. Just to sort of introduce yourself to our audience, please.
It'll be my pleasure. Back in 1988, I was living in Minnesota, practicing a little law, and that's where I grew up when I discovered that then INS was interested in hiring me as a special agent. And that brought me to Chicago in 1988, wherein I rose up through the ranks over the years to the level of supervisory special agent. But I also did a lot of teaching at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center down in Brunswick, Georgia, and also did some international teaching. They sent me off to Nigeria and Hungary and various places around the United States to teach immigration and naturalization law. So it was quite an interesting career.
Very interesting. So can you tell us a little bit? You probably spent an hour and a half answering this stupid question I'm about to ask. But how was ICE supposed to work when it came to an individual discovered or suspected, I should say, of being here in the U.S. illegally? Can you just sort of walk us through the basics of as an ICE agent or a supervisory special agent, how you handled a case like that?
Okay, Joel, well, there are basically three encounters that an ICE agent can have with the public. One is consensual. Mm-hmm. The other one would be an investigative stop. And the final one would be an arrest, which is the most serious one. When we talk about consensual, that's exactly what it means, is that when an ICE agent wants to talk to any individual in the public, and they just want to kind of find out if the person has status in the country, they are free to walk up to anybody and ask them questions, but that person's got to be able to understand that they're free to walk away. Mm-hmm. If there's any kind of constraint on their movement, then it's not consensual anymore. By definition, they are being seized. And you can seize things, or you can seize people's bodies. Well, a temporary detention is a form of seizure of the person, and it's also called an investigative stop. And in those situations, the person is under reasonable suspicion, if you're going to stop them, you have to have as an officer reasonable suspicion that the person is either attempting to engage in some kind of criminal or administrative violation. But again, I emphasize there has to be a reasonable suspicion. You can't just stop people willy-nilly. And when you have this reasonable suspicion, it's got to be something that they've done that's within your jurisdiction. So if you're an ICE agent, it's within your jurisdiction to talk to somebody about a possible immigration violation. And so the reasonable suspicion, that, again, is grounds for an investigative stop. You're also allowed to actually do a pat-down, if you want to frisk, if you will, to check to make sure the person doesn't have any weapons while you're engaging them in an interview. And during the course of that interview, it should only be so long, it should only last so long as to either confirm or dispel the idea that they've engaged in some kind of illegal activity. If you find that they haven't, you have to let them go. It's only when you have ascertained that they have been engaged in some kind of illegal activity, it could be criminal or it could be administrative, then you've moved up to probable cause. That's when you can take them to custody. It's a full arrest. But we have taught our agents that the preferred way of arresting people is to have a warrant. That is what the Fourth Amendment requires, unless there's some applicable legally recognized exception to that. You have to have otherwise reasonable cause. Probable cause. And it seems that there are agents that are going out there right now who are stopping people without either reasonable suspicion to just simply ask them questions to ascertain whether or not they've been involved in some kind of criminal activity, or they are arresting them and taking them into custody, again, without warrants. And we've taught our agents that you got to identify yourself.
That was going to be my question. Yeah.
Yeah, you're supposed to identify what agency you're with, quite frankly.
Does that mean showing an identification card of some sort or an ID, or is it okay just to state it? And also the mask, did those agents were they masked before?
No, when I was a supervisor, I would never have dreamed of sending out agents going out there with their name tags and badges concealed or wearing a mask. That just wouldn't happen, because these are police state tactics. This is right out of the manual for how to run a police state. Have anonymous police officers going out there without warrants, without probable cause, stopping people and arresting them. Federal regulation requires ICE agents to at least identify their agency. Now, unfortunately, there is no federal statute as of yet that requires them to identify them personally, who they are, their name, for example, or their badge number, although it's good practice to do that. But there isn't actually, remarkably enough, no federal statute that requires that yet, although there is one pending called the Visible Act that would require an agent, except for understandably undercover investigations, they would be required to wear the insignia, have a name tag, have a badge number that's conspicuous so people can see. Because if we don't do that, Joel, how can you hold police officers who do wrong, who violate people's constitutional rights, accountable if you first can't even identify them? You got to be able to identify them, and this concealment of identities wreaks havoc on being able to do oversight of them, to hold them accountable if they've done wrong, and it also makes it possible for vigilantes to get involved and pretend to be some kind of authority, federal authority, and they can buy T-shirts online or whatever with any kind of insignia on it. And a lot of people, and this has been happening around the country, a lot of undocumented immigrants or illegal aliens are getting duped into thinking that they're being taken away by federal agents when in fact they're not. So this is one of the disturbing things about what's happening right now in America.
Reed, this is Bill. Thank you so much for being here today. This is really, really fascinating. It's such an important conversation. And I think your observation about the mask is so central to understanding the dynamic here. I'm curious about your thoughts on whether ICE has become politicized, because it does feel as an organization, it's always faced some level of criticism, but the sense of it almost as a partisan actor or acting on the behalf as Trump's, personal sort of rogue agency is that a fair assessment, or do you worry about these allegations of becoming more of a political actor as you look at what we're seeing playing out on the streets these days?
I believe it's the latter. I believe that Trump is raising his own military, his own civilian military to enforce his own policies, his own biases, and he's using ICE as that military force with this extraordinary amount of billions of dollars that they are now providing to the agency, $170 billion, I think it's going to be, and that's going to be used to build up more of these concentration camps like the so-called Alligator Alley down in Florida, which is, I think, an abomination. They're going to be giving the private industrial incarceration complex monies so that they can take in people that are being arrested. They're revoking the legal status in some cases of aliens or people who are even here with documentation when they speak out in public against American foreign policy, like what's happening in Gaza. And, everybody, whether you're a citizen or not a citizen, you have a First Amendment right, freedom of speech. And unfortunately, there's been at least one immigration judge who has held that the Secretary of State can rescind the visa of someone who's a non-citizen who speaks out their mind out about this, if in the Secretary's opinion, their presence in the United States constitutes some kind of a threat to our foreign policy. So in this case, that would be Marco Rubio. And, of course, I'm sure it brings to mind the case of Khalil Mahmoud back in April. He tried to do that to him. That provision, that code provision, is of dubious constitutionality. It has yet to be tested in the Supreme Court. I think if it ever got to there that the Secretary of State has this kind of power, I believe it would be held unconstitutional eventually. But right now, it is the law of the land. The Secretary of State can rescind your status, even if you're here legally, if he or she doesn't like what you say politically. And I just think that runs contrary to democratic principles.
Reed, I'm going to make myself a little nauseous right now and present what I would imagine would be, is he Secretary or Director Holman's response if he hadn't something that was not unhinged. You said that ICE agents have to identify the federal agency they're with. Well, these guys do have jackets that say ICE and police on them. And you did say that they could arrest, if I understood you, without showing ID or badge. So is the problem that I'm hearing you have today with the numbers and the scope? But not necessarily what ICE rules that you would train are they breaking today beyond just the numbers and the scope at which they're taking these actions?
Well, I think that for one thing, they're violating Fourth Amendment rights. Because you're supposed to have, when you're going out to arrest people, you're supposed to have a warrant. It could be a criminal warrant or it could be an administrative warrant. The criminal warrant would be issued by a federal magistrate. Administrative warrants are issued for arrests for administrative violations, not criminal.
But I thought you had said probable cause before, though. So wouldn't these guys just argue, well, there's probable cause, and so they go ahead?
Oh, well... go ahead. Yeah, this is where it gets a little tricky because you have to have reasonable suspicion of someone's criminality in order to just stop them without a warrant. But if you don't have that reasonable suspicion, or you're not allowed to arrest them, you need to have then probable cause to arrest them. Mm-hmm. And again, that should be the result of having probable cause that you got a warrant. The preferred method of arresting people is that you have a warrant. It's presumed at law to be an unreasonable seizure if you do not have a warrant when you arrest people. In other words, you take people into custody. And unless there is a recognized exception, and that exception would be if there is a reasonable belief, not just suspicion, but a reasonable belief that the person you've arrested has committed a crime or is in the process of committing one, and this would be a reasonably prudent conclusion to come to that that's what that person is doing.
So let me ask you this, Reed, if I may interject. So was having this conversation the other day with a relative of mine who used to be a lawyer, who said that numerous times, this was not in Chicago, in another city, numerous times at the courthouse, he would see, and this would during the Obama years when there was pretty heavy deportation activity, would see ICE agents come up, seize people, and immediately send them, bring them to detention centers where they would, without notifying family who didn't have a way to contact them, they didn't have lawyers, and these detention centers in another state far away, and they would essentially be disappeared there for weeks and weeks. And at that point, he lost track of them. But he knows they were taken without warrants. They were arrested. They were detained for long periods of time, and family would have to try and figure out where the heck they were. So I kind of come back. It sounds like ICE was using these methods as much as 15, 20 years ago. Is that?
Yeah, these are basically stormtrooper methods, and they need to be challenged in court. And again, in order to arrest somebody without a warrant, not only do you have to have probable cause, but you also have to have some articulable reason as to why you have to arrest them now, such as they're likely to abscond before you can get a warrant. Fair. But if you know that somebody is going to be at a hearing, and you know that you have reasonable suspicion that they've been involved with some crime, or actually you've got probable cause, you do believe, it's prudent that you believe it. If you know that they're going to be appearing at some, say, immigration hearing, you have time to get a warrant, and they're not getting warrants. They're not getting administrative warrants, and they're not getting criminal warrants. Again, you can have a situation where you're arresting somebody both for a criminal violation or an administrative violation, and or you can have a situation where you have a person who's only suspected of a crime, or you can have a situation where there's a person only suspected of an administrative violation. In that latter one, you need to have an administrative warrant. In the former, where you have a criminal violation that you believe they've done, you should have an arrest warrant. Now, if you have a situation where they've done both a crime and an administrative violation, you can arrest them with a warrant, a criminal warrant. That takes priority over the administrative warrant. So you would be telling them their Miranda rights, for example, and you would take them in front of a magistrate right away. Then you would take care of the administrative aspect of it. But when you know, again, the general preferred way of arresting people is you have a warrant. And if you do it without a warrant, then you have to have, in the case of an administrative situation, you have to have probable cause, or even in a criminal situation, you have to have probable cause. But you also have to have a likelihood of a person absconding before you can get a warrant. So again, distinguish that from a detention, an investigative stop. That has to be based upon reasonable suspicion to stop somebody and question them momentarily. Now, if during your questioning you've ascertained that they've committed some kind of violation, either criminal or civil, then that kind of, if you find out they've done that, then that escalates up to probable cause. Now, you've stopped them without a warrant, and now you're arresting them without a warrant, but there's an exception here because it's likely that they will abscond before you can go get a warrant. But in the case of a hearing where you've heard a lot of immigrants have gone to a hearing in front of an immigration judge because they're in the process of trying to obtain legal status. The agents know that that person's going to be there. That's why they're outside of the courthouse, or maybe they're appearing to face some other kind of thing.
Yeah, which means they're not absconding.
Yeah, right. Okay,
yeah, they're not absconding.
Reed, I have a question for you that I think I know the answer to, but I kind of want to hear your thoughts on it. Why are they doing this? Why no warrants?
Sorry.
Why no masks? Right? I mean, is there some non-sinister, logistical, practical reason for doing this? The one that jumps out at me obviously is fear and intimidation, trying to create an extrajudicial police force here. But what is the advantage of not using warrants and not masks and violating Fourth Amendment rights? I mean, as you think about all that, why are they doing this?
Well, I think that the elephant in the room is simply that the current president pandered to a lot of the latent racism, bigotry of a big portion of the American population. It's what got him elected. And he doesn't seem to have a problem with immigration when it comes to maybe certain ladies from Eastern Europe.
Coming from Sweden, yeah.
And apparently now from South Africa, people of a certain color. But when it comes to people who are non-white from other parts of the world, he seems to have a definite problem with it. And there's a lot of, unfortunately, a lot of our fellow Americans who also have problems with non-white people and they're nativists. And that's what helped get him into office in the first place, along with what I consider to be a lot of false promises about how he's going to make life economically easier for these same people. So he's just serving his own political agenda and not really about law and order. I don't think this has anything to do with law and order, because he had said at first that he was going to go after criminal aliens. And everybody agrees that we don't need violent criminals here who are from other countries. Let's find them and get rid of them.
They defined alien as criminal.
Yeah,
is what they've done.
Yeah, exactly. They've equated being an alien with being a criminal, and that's just not fair. The overwhelming majority of these undocumented immigrants or illegal aliens, that is a legal term that I have to use sometimes, that's in the statutes. These are people who are just here to find a better life. Oftentimes they've escaped from parts of South America and Central America where life was made unbearable for them, oftentimes by our own foreign policies, where they are escaping oppressive regimes and narco traffickers who are threatening their lives, the lives of their families, unless they do get to the United States, where hopefully they can find sanctuary and apply for asylum. And some are just coming here to find a better life economically, that sort of thing. And they're just quietly going about their business. And actually, some of them become pillars of their respective communities, start businesses, hire people, employ people, that sort of thing. And they've been here for years and years and years. These people are not a threat to the security of the nation. In fact, they add billions of dollars to our economy here.
Very good for the economy. Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. As you were talking, I was thinking about, my brain jumped back to the George W. Bush administration and the way in which they dealt with a detention. And I think the George W. Bush administration had many flaws to them, but they at least tried to work within the laws, right? They tried to say, okay, we can interpret our enhanced interrogation as being consistent with the law. Is it your sense that the Trump administration is trying to work outside of the law now? Does it feel like ICE is saying that we are going to disregard Fourth Amendment rights? We're going to disregard the norms or practices about masks. I mean, does it feel like it is outside the law at this point?
Oh, he is exactly trying to do that. And if he can't do it and get away with it because the courts might enjoin him, he's trying desperately to invoke the Alien Enemies Act of 1798. And under that, you can deport non-citizens without hearings if under certain circumstances. But that act, the Alien Enemies Act, was intended to be invoked during a time of declared war against a foreign government. And it's not intended for the way that he's doing it, where he's trying to equate immigrants who are here as some kind of an invasion force from a specific country, like, for example, Venezuela, so that he can say it's a quasi-governmental action, an invasion of our country on the part of these nationals, and therefore I'm going to invoke the Enemies Act and do away with all these people, deport them all without hearings. And that's very dubious constitutional ground there. The Alien Enemies Act has only been invoked 3 times in our entire history. And it isn't just, it's just not applicable to people who are just coming here to find a better way of life.
Yeah.
And Trump is not interested in seemingly getting our immigration system reformed, which is what it needs. I don't think he really feels that we are being invaded by a bunch of criminals and therefore we're all in peril. I think that he's just fear-mongering in order to keep the support of his MAGA base, and there's just really no need for this. Ronald Reagan gave an amnesty back in the 1980s, and I think he with the wave of a hand, basically got legal status for about 11 million undocumented immigrants at that time. And we could do that again, considering that we have a great economic boom from having this labor here.
Yeah.
And I mean, these people are paying taxes up the wazoo for programs that they'll probably never benefit from, like Social Security and Medicare. And they pay sales taxes, and they.
But Reed,
buy
it goes further than that. To my sort of flippant comment before that the regime was making aliens illegal, they're making people with legal status suddenly in violation. The rescission of temporary protected status for particularly those from Afghanistan who served under our military, serving as translators and in other capacities, suddenly stripping them of that status while they were legally in the system, going through the process to get full-time status, green cards or citizenship. And I think there's also been a rescission of temporary protected status for people from Haiti who are fleeing dire threats at home. So the administration is, in a literal sense, making legal residents here be here in violation illegally. We need to take a break soon. Reed, when we come back, I'd like to throw out a discussion of is or is not what is happening, does it fall under the definition of kidnapping, and if it is, or if it is otherwise illegal, given that it's the federal government agency carrying out these actions, whose job is it to stop it, and who has the ability to stop it? But we'll come to that after a break.
You're listening to The Big Picture with Edwin Eisendrath on WCPT 820.
Monday on Live, Local, and Progressive, Joan Esposito will be talking to Pat Kreitlow, founder and editor of Up North News, and Bruce Rines, former CBS Los Angeles deputy bureau chief. Live, Local, and Progressive weekdays from 2 to 5 Central on WCPT, Chicago's progressive talk for 20 years. And you are listening to The Big Picture with Edwin Eisendrath. You might have noticed I am not Edwin Eisendrath. Is away. This is Joel Ostrow. I am here with Bill Muck. And we are talking to Reed Bible, who is a retired ICE supervisory special agent here in Chicago. He is now out of state. And before the break, I raised the question of are the tactics, the actions that ICE agents are taking around the country, including here in Chicago, do they fall under the definition of kidnapping? And whether or not it's kidnapping, given it's federal agents or supposed agents who are carrying out these acts, whose job is it to enforce the law and uphold the law? So, Reed, I don't know if you might address those 2 points as you see it.
Oh, now we get into a really sticky situation here, Joel, because first of all, let's talk about what is kidnapping. And under statutory laws, most of them, it's the unlawful, forcible abduction of someone and carrying them away. Mm-hmm. So there's force, it's unlawful force, and you're carrying someone away. That usually fits the definition of statutory kidnapping in pretty much all the states, I think. There is a common law definition, which is not really what we go by so much as far as kidnapping, in which not only do you have those three elements, but you're carrying them away, ironically, to a country other than their own. So if we were talking about common law kidnapping, this would be something that would not be technically kidnapping because we're not carrying these people away to a country other than their own. But we don't use the common law in this area. We're using statutory law, and that is down to unlawful force and carrying away. So then we have to define what's unlawful here. Well, if you arrest somebody without a warrant, that is presumably unlawful force. It's unreasonable, unless there is a recognized exception to it. And there's possibility that there can be exceptions to it without the warrant. So then we get down to the point of, if you are using unlawful force, which I think in many of these cases it's unlawful because it's warrantless and there's no recognized exception, who is responsible in the government to prosecute this, hold people accountable? Well, immediately what comes to mind is that you've got Kristi Noem, who is the Secretary of Homeland Security. She ought to be enforcing the law. You might consider the Attorney General, Ms. Bondi. She's supposed to enforce the law, but they're failing to do it. And so now we have to prevail upon the courts to go in there and enforce the law. And a lot of these courts are, especially the Supreme Court, seems to be doing everything it can to bend over backwards to accommodate the Trump policies, like when they had the Trump versus Casa case come down before, where they could have decided about birthright citizenship on the merits, that the executive order taking it away is blatantly unconstitutional. But they first chose to address that as a procedural matter that a federal court judge cannot issue nationwide injunctions. So they just kind of skirted by that at first. To me, there's a blatant, decided bent towards allowing Donald Trump to implement his own policies, pursue his own political agenda, irrespective of whether it's constitutional or not. And only when they're most forced to, their backs are up against the wall, do these justices actually have, and they have to decide something on the merits, do they actually comply with the Constitution? So unfortunately, this leaves only one other branch of government that could possibly rectify the situation, and that would be if Congress were to not only impeach Donald Trump, but the Senate actually convict him. Right now, we have no guardrails in place, it seems to me, any longer. Our branches of government are failing us, and ultimately the people are the boss. Next year, we have a midterm election, and 2 years after that, a presidential election. We're just going to have to decide what our principles are in this country and elect people into office that will carry out what we believe are the principles of our democracy. And I've never seen a situation like this in this country. We have legal chaos right now, and the author of it is the President of the United States.
But, Reed, you left out one branch of law enforcement. When I think of law enforcement, the first thing I think of is not Pam Bondi or Kristi Noem. I think of the police.
Yeah.
So where are they? And what's their job? What's their responsibility in the face of these illegal seizures and of citizens or civilians, these illegal seizures, kidnappings?
Well, this is very problematic as well because, you know, we have what we call sanctuary cities. Chicago is one of them, where they have decided not to cooperate with ICE operations. And because they want the undocumented immigrants there to feel safe, feel that they can go about their normal lives, because basically the only thing they violated is administrative law. They haven't violated criminal law. And I'm sure that Chicago PD would cooperate when it comes to taking into custody criminal aliens, people who have been certified as having committed a crime. I'm sure Chicago PD would not have a problem with that. Where we get into the problem is when we're talking about administrative status. And unfortunately, the federal government has, under the superiority and supremacy clause, rather, the laws of the federal government prevail, or are supposed to, over local law. And so you could have a problem where you have these two bodies, state police and federal police, butting up against each other on the substance of the law. However, there's an even more critical one, too, I think, for the safety of the public, and that is, what if you have ICE agents who don't wear insignia, conceal their identity, and they're going out snatching people in what appears to be wholesale kidnapping,
right.
And local police are informed, notified about this, and so they send out police officers who are wearing their insignia, who are wearing their badges, and they see this activity going on. They don't know for certain if these are federal agents or not.
So why aren't they arresting them?
That's a good point, is that they're going to, at that point, probably, in practical terms, the federal agent will identify himself, but it may not happen. It may be that you have a federal agent who is being anonymous and resents being handled by the police, maybe even draws his weapon or something, threatens violence. Now you got a police officer who has reason to believe that he's in imminent mortal danger, and you could have as much as a gunplay going on here. Somebody could get killed.
No, I mean, federal agents can break the law,
right.
And people who break the law should be arrested if we have rule of law. But Bill, go ahead.
Nobody is above the law at that point. Yeah. Reed, I'm curious about what all of this is doing to morale within the organization. Is this, I mean, I'm curious. It's possible that there are members of ICE who are happy with these changes, but it's also possible that they're frustrated for all the reasons that you're citing. You know, the potential conflicts with police, the violating the law. What's your sense of what ICE agents and individuals within the organization, how are they feeling about all these changes?
Well, unfortunately, I can't tell you about the current active agents. I can only talk to you about the agents I worked with, and it's been a minute since I retired. I'm not a spring chicken, but I wish I were, but I'm not. But it runs the gamut. I am very upset about this because it's embarrassing to me to even have to say that I'm a retired ICE supervisor, because I don't want to be lumped into the same category as people who are this lawless and, quite frankly, so devoid of humanity. But I know of some of my former colleagues that I never really was great friends with who are just fine with this. And, in fact, back during the election of Donald Trump last year, I would get into a sort of distant arguments with some of the agents that were okay that we were electing a guy who instigated a riot in which federal law enforcement officers, our fellow officers, were attacked at the nation's capital back in 2021. They didn't seem to have a problem with that. It just was bizarre to me that here you are a federal law enforcement officer, retired, and you're okay with a man who encouraged attacks on our nation's capital and upon the state capitol police, and they got seriously injured. That to me, but they're also of that mindset where they seem to have a little bit of a problem with people of color, too. Yeah. Unfortunately, I had to work with that side in ICE. And then there are other people like myself who are just as upset as I am because they think this is disgraceful. This is a lack of law and order. This man is falsely claiming to be the law and order president when he's not. Mm-hmm. But unfortunately, he gets backing up from the Supreme Court when, as you might recall last summer, our Supreme Court did what I never would have imagined when I was a law student. They said that he is immune from criminal liability. So that to me means that he's officially above the law.
Yeah. You know, you're a supervisory agent, so presumably you supervise some folks who are current agents. If one of those were a supervisory agent now who saw the world and saw the law, saw what was supposed to be, as you do, Reed, what sort of options do they have? What recourse do they have in the face of these illegal orders? If you were in that position now and all of this were going on, in practical terms, what could you do? I'm not even asking what you would do. What would be at your disposal? What sort of tools do you have in the face of this madness?
Well, it's interesting you should ask me that, because that is a question that I've been pondering for the last several months. If I were still an active ICE agent, what would I do in this situation? One thing would be to quit, because I don't want to be a party of it. But, of course, that means that my livelihood gets cut off, and that would be problematic.
And your voice.
But that's one option.
Right,
yeah,
and your voice inside, right? Yeah.
Exactly. So that's one option that I would discount. Another one would be, which Trump has made now impossible, is I could go talk to the Inspector General about the situation. And the Office of Inspector General, but he's been firing inspectors general. So that's an option that would not be open to me. Then I could just outright be insubordinate and defy orders that I'm told to send people out in masks. I wouldn't do it, and they'd probably want to fire me, and then I'd have to sue the federal government for wrongful discharge and see if I could prevail in court. And that to me is about, other than... And
even if you prevailed in court, who's going to enforce that court ruling? So that's really depressing, but that's sort of what I suspected would be your answer.
And it creates a culture of impunity, right? So, I mean, so in the future, there are going to be fewer Reeds in the organization because they say, I don't want this headache, I'll go somewhere else. And then the organization suffers because of this. I mean,
and that's happening throughout the federal government,
100%, right? Yeah, earlier we talked about the adults in the room all leave, the Reeds all leave, and then those who are more amenable to these kind of tactics are sticking around. Reed, I'm curious. Go ahead.
That's the big fear, gentlemen, and quite frankly, there are Stephen Miller types in ICE right now that are agents that they move up through the ranks up high quickly because they're being lackeys for the president, and they may not even be qualified, but they get moved up to the ranks. You know, there's a young man, a 22-year-old guy in Denver, Colorado, who was put in charge of the center there for counterintelligence investigations. And he has absolutely no law enforcement experience. All he is a very solidly pro-Trump supporter. Somehow or another, he came to the attention of Donald Trump, and Donald Trump made sure that he got to be the director of that ICE center. This is the kind of absurdity that's happening right now.
You know, as you were talking, I was thinking about these commercials. Of all the things that have rattled me most about this issue are these commercials, the DHS commercials with Kristi Noem, where she's out there. And, you know, this is a multi-million-dollar ad campaign that's running both domestically, internationally, warning undocumented migrants to leave or face deportation. I'm curious about your reaction when you first saw these and whether this is sort of the face of ICE that you think is appropriate.
Well, quite frankly, after I saw the first time a couple of them, I wanted to throw something at my TV.
Sure.
I thought
but then with the tariffs, you know, you don't want to have to buy a new TV.
Yeah, exactly. Because I thought, this woman is just blatantly lying. I'm tired of her pretending to be an ICE agent, where she dresses up in her cutesy little outfits and goes to the border and pretend like she's an agent or a Border Patrol agent for a day, or she flies down to El Salvador and taunts those men that were put down there unlawfully and being tortured. I just find her abhorrent as a human being. And she makes it sound like the overwhelming majority of undocumented immigrants here are some kind of criminals when they're not. First of all, they are creating more and more undocumented ones because they're revoking the legal status of people who've got TPS or they got parole status or even lappers. That's our term for lawfully admitted permanent resident, a lapper. They're stripping them of their status when they make a political comment that the Secretary of State doesn't like. So now they're reduced to being here undocumented or unlawfully, and yet they did nothing criminal. And 99.9% of the undocumented here are people who are just workaday people trying to live their lives. There's a very small percentage of criminal aliens here that are illegally here. And yes, they are involved with drug trafficking or sex trafficking, that sort of thing. Those are the ones we should be focusing on, but she's not focusing on them. She's trying to make everyone in the immigrant community fearful, and that could bite us all on the ass, so to speak. I hope that didn't get blipped, because we oftentimes rely upon those sources in the immigrant community to give us tips about criminal activity that's going on. But they're not going to come to us when they think, well, if I call ICE or the police, I'm going to get deported, even though I'm just working at the bakery here, but I saw something. And also, they're the victims of violent crime. They can't come to the police to file a complaint and get protection because they're fearful that ICE is going to be notified about their existence, and the next thing you know, they're going to be getting snatched at their landscaping job. Mm-hmm. So it's just utter chaos, legal chaos, and we have got to take account of ourselves as to what kind of a nation do we want to be, because we need to recognize historically that our strength has been our diversity and our immigrants. Not to denigrate our Native Americans either, because if they had had a stronger immigration policy, none of us would be here. But this is what makes America strong, is all these different perspectives here. We should be cherishing immigration and do something to fix our immigration system.
Yeah. It occurred to me as you were talking, from what I understand, at this point, the majority of those who are being detained are being held in private for-profit detention centers. And I wonder if you might comment on that. To my knowledge, nobody has yet done the tracing of who the owners of those facilities are and what their connections may or may not be to the administration. So any speculation on that would right now fall under the heading of conspiracy theory, which I don't like to engage in. But certainly the circumstantial evidence is worrisome there. Was it always the case that the detention facilities were under private ownership, at least when you were working? And what do you see? Do you see that as a problem, as a concern? Is that part of what's behind all of this even?
Well, in Chicago, we did have limited facilities as far as government-owned or leased, federal government-owned or leased properties. There's a facility that I believe is still out there in Broadview that is not intended to be an overnight facility. Okay, well, it's not intended to be an overnight facility because the municipality there, the municipal government won't allow that. It can only be a temporary detention. And there's a division of ICE, the Deportation and Detention Division, that is charged with the responsibility of finding places to house the people who have been detained. And usually they lease out jail facilities of local municipalities. It could be Stone Park or someplace like that, where they will keep them. But then there are large detention facilities in various parts of the country that they can be removed to if they're going to be long-term people. But these were, during my time, these were always government-operated places. And then I think about maybe 5 years after I retired, and by the way, I retired in 2008, I started noticing this tendency towards wanting to privatize things, let the market step in. A big thing that Republicans in particular like to do is engage the market and let private detention facilities come in to provide housing. And they love doing it because they make a lot of money off of it. They know the federal government has limited facilities to store, to house or imprison these people, or detain them, I should say, and they make a lot of money off of it. But the problem is that they are not federally trained people, and oftentimes they seem to cut corners when it comes to things like the safety of the inmates, like their health care, for example, the quality of their food, and they have poorly trained detention officers that I think sometimes are subject to being abusive to their detainees. So it's very worrisome to me. And when I was on the county board in Will County a few years back, there was a private corporation that was proposing building such a facility in Will County. And I was pleased to say that both Republicans as well as Democrats on the board alike were against it. Most overwhelming majority of us were against it.
Reed, okay, let's say tomorrow they say we got to make some changes here, and they bring in Reed Bible to take over. Where does the organization go? What reforms are necessary? You know, if you were put in charge of fixing things, where do you spend your time? What's the first thing that you think about?
I always think, first of all, training. is very important. It always seems to be the first thing that gets cut in budgets. But training to know what is the law and what is not the law, what is policy and what is not policy, and politics should not be something that alters constitutional rights. We're all supposed to, as Americans, agree upon a certain core of principles and values. At least I thought we did. And they're embodied largely in the Bill of Rights. And we need to adhere to that. Also, when it comes to recruiting people, I think that I would probably increase the eligibility requirements to be a special agent to where they have to all have at least a bachelor's degree, and also perhaps some kind of experience somewhere before they become federal agents. I wouldn't say that I would cut it off at being high school graduate and then have some work experience, because I don't think that's enough. I think that we need to have people who have trained in sociology or political science or history or law enforcement, something of that nature, a better quality of candidate in there, because I saw too many candidates agents that I think should never have been permitted to be special agents in the first place because of their racial attitudes, racial beliefs. I would make sure that we had enough funding for proper training of people, and if we have, if we also concentrate on how to reconfigure our immigration system where it's not quota-based, and we have some other way of doing it that has priorities that are not just either you have somebody who's already family here or you are connected to somebody who's rich here who can buy a visa for you, but something where we let humanitarian considerations be a large part of who gets visas, as well as the skills that people have that they could come if they come and study here and decide they want to stay, that we want those skills here because we have a need for a lot of people who are trained in the STEM area.
Yeah.
And
I would imagine, right now. I would imagine, Reed, that a lot of our listeners are frustrated that we haven't asked this question yet. But, Bill, thank you for setting this one up. And, Reed, your answer partly also set it up. Do you think the majority of these masked agents are, in fact, I don't know how to put it, ICE agents, or were they enlisted in the last 6 months from elsewhere? In other words, do you think they were ever trained as ICE agents, or are they perhaps people who recently received pardons?
My suspicion is that they are not fully trained federal agents. I think that they are contracted. They are contracted, something like bounty hunters almost, contracted enforcement people who have not been certified as having passed courses that all ICE agents should be passing down at the academy. I think that they may get a week or two quickie, lick and a promise training, and given some kind of a hokey badge and told that you can go out now and arrest people and crack heads. I don't think they know very much about criminal procedure or criminal substantive law or constitutional law at all. I think all they know is that I've got a badge and a gun and handcuffs, and we're going to go out and arrest us some brown people and black people and get them out of the country. I think that's pretty much the mentality that they're possessed of.
A lot of them were not sure they have badges.
Right. Reed, this has been really insightful. Yeah. Your previous comment, you said politics should not alter our constitutional rights, and I wrote that down because it is so spot on. We need to let you go, but thank you so much. We've been speaking with Reed Bible, former ICE official supervisor. Really appreciate your time and your insight.
Thank you so much, Reed.
You're welcome.
So
it's my pleasure, guys. You have a good day.
Thank you so much. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back after this on WCPT.
You're listening to The Big Picture with Edwin Eisendrath on WCPT 820.
We are back. Again, you may have noticed that this is not Edwin Eisendrath. I'm Joel Ostrow here with Bill Muck, substituting today. and we are going to get right into it. We're about to speak with someone who about a month ago became one of my favorite people in the world, to be honest. A truly remarkable woman, native of the Chicago area. When Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine, she went to Ukraine first to work with an NGO, and because that wasn't enough, got herself trained as a combat medic, served at the front, and then became a trainer of combat medics herself. Rima Ziuraitas, thank you so much for joining us from Ukraine. And how are you doing, first of all?
Oh, I'm good. Sleep deprived as usual, but otherwise
You did say you never sleep.
I do not. Not really. No. There's no time.
Can you maybe briefly just tell the listeners what it is you do there? I know it's impossible to do this briefly, but if you can try.
All right. Let me try to cliff notes this one as much as possible. So right now I'm an active duty combat medic in the Armed Forces of Ukraine, specifically the International Legion. I work mostly for Casevac, Medevac, and Stabilization Point. I'm not an infantry medic. I am on more of the advanced side for evacuation and stabilization. And I also train our infantry and other medics in CLS, Combat Lifesaver, and Combat Corpsman. In addition to 10,000 other projects that I do on the side, mostly as an active American to try to spread the word about Ukraine and like why it's important to support Ukraine and democracy. So that's the best.
Your former teacher, Bill Muck, is bursting to say hi.
Yes. Hey, I'm so delighted to reconnect. Yes, and thank you so much for taking some time to chat with us. We really appreciate your perspective. I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about our listeners what motivated you to embrace this work that you're doing and the challenge that you've accepted and no sleep and all the adventure and stress and all. What prompted you to think about this course of life?
It's going to sound a little odd, but maybe civic duty. I mean, I am a political scientist,
yes.
So maybe it's just like, I think that's part of it, just like action, like doing something, like if you really believe in the cause, then like follow through. That's kind of where I arrived at.
I feel civic duty and believe in the cause. I didn't go over there.
Yeah, but I don't know how to describe it. I guess like I woke up and I thought, well, what the hell? In 2014, I did the Washington, D.C. thing. I advocated for Ukraine when, Russia invaded Crimea. And like February 22 rolled around. It just like wasn't enough. And at that point, I was like, I can't keep doing the same thing. Because I'd been to Washington in the first 6 months of the war like 8 times, and it just wasn't enough. And I think the problem was, too, that, like, I needed to see it for myself.
Speaking of seeing it, when Brian Endless and I, another former teacher of yours, had you on the World Discord podcast, it was about 5 or 6 weeks ago now, and that was when the United States had officially cut off all military and non-military aid, and I asked you at the time if you perceived a change in the field among your comrades and both sort of morally and materially. And so now that the whiplash has gone the other direction, have you seen a boost in morale? Have you seen any material? Have you seen a change in weapons and change in supplies that you need? Which, by the way, let's get back to before we end this with how people can contribute. But have you seen a positive change on the ground over the last week or two?
I think it's cautious optimism. Like when you whiplash somebody that much, or like a population with like, yes, we're doing, we're going to give you aid. No, we're not doing it. Like, we kind of hold our breath. Everybody's kind of holding their breath a little bit going, okay, like, we'll believe it when we see it kind of thing, which is unfortunately problematic with this administration. We just never really know what we're going to get. And then when we have when there are issues here with internal politics and the right uses that as a way to be like, see, or whatever. And you just kind of sit there and be like, okay, great. Well, that's not what we meant. And internal politics have nothing to do with the war, but the narrative has to play into their hands, so they'll use any excuse.
Cautious optimism is better than what you described before, though.
Yeah. I'm curious. Like, what is morale like? Because you're right. It's a complicated situation where you're thinking about the conflict itself. You're thinking about internal politics in Ukraine. You're thinking about domestic politics in the United States. What are people feeling, and what do you see on the ground there in terms of how people are feeling about the state of the conflict?
I mean, honestly, like, I feel like for an invasion, like, I feel like conflict is like it's not the right term for what's happening here. But like at the same time, Russia's pushing hard and they're relentless. So they've been, bombing Western cities a lot harder now. And like, I think that's because they think they have a get out of jail free card, because the West is just kind of like, well, we're going to just take a really wishy-washy approach, or every day Trump changes his mind about, how he feels about Ukraine and Putin and all that jazz. And then Melania steps in and goes, well, did you know they bombed another city? And then suddenly, Trump is awake at the wheel. But like, it's just kind of one of those things where like there's still a ton of gratitude. Like Ukraine is still very grateful for everything that the U.S. has, given thus far. But like when you have like relentless missile strikes on a constant basis, like Russia literally sent a missile into a grocery market in Dobropilia. We're in broad daylight. Like, why? And that kind of thing. So I think it's hard to like be like happy. I think people are just like, resilient. Like it's just resilient determination to just keep going.
And you are closer to the front, right? Right.
Yes.
In general.
In general, yes. So like, when we're rotated, we're out at the front. So like that's, it depends.
But you're not
on
in
where
Kyiv,
the stabilization
for example. Right, you're not in Kyiv.
I will not discuss where my location is right now. Period. I can't do that for OPSEC reasons. But that's what neither here nor there.
But the reason I ask is like the new delivery of like there was a whole Patriot system apparently that has already arrived in Ukraine. My point was that might present a material benefit for whichever city that system is designed to protect. Those things are not going closer to the front or places where you're located.
No, they do not. Right. No, and the problematic thing is like there are cities like Kharkiv and other larger cities in the east that don't have any of that protection or not enough of it. So like it mainly goes to the western cities most of the time. I would love to see enough Patriot systems to, travel to the larger cities in the eastern side because, they're kind of fending for themselves at this point. But yeah, you're right. It would benefit the western side more than the eastern side or the south for that matter.
And so, Rima, as the world's attention sort of drifts in and out of Ukraine, what stories or perspectives about what's going on do you think are being missed, right? It feels like, the first...
I think I've lost you guys.
Oh, can you hear us now?
Hello?
Oh, we think we may have lost Rima for the moment.
Can you repeat the question?
Oh, of course.
A little bit better now. Can you repeat the question?
Absolutely. So, I was just asking, as the world's attention on Ukraine comes and goes and drifts away, what stories or perspectives do you think are being missed? What are we not learning about? Early on in the conflict, it was nonstop coverage, but now it's not that same type of coverage. So what are we missing?
I think we're missing a lot of like the context of what happens like when civilian sites are attacked all the time. And it's not just in Kyiv or like other Western cities. It's the populations that are targeted in the eastern side, or like, for example, in Kherson, the Russians are playing human safari with civilians, hunting them with drones and dropping munitions on their, like literally it's like Squid Games in Kherson. It's terrible. And that's not something that's being reported on at all. Or the fact that the prisoners of war that come back maybe live for a few weeks after they return from Russia. And half of them 90% of them were tortured horribly and don't survive re-entry into free world. We're missing a lot of those things. And I think like the massive amount of violations of the Geneva Convention are just not on the world stage. And it's like, it's almost as if it's just being completely ignored in many ways. And it's not that Ukrainian Western, centric media is not reporting it. It's just not being picked up. And that's like the hard part about all of it, is that like, it just doesn't get the coverage. And so what we see every day is not translated to the rest of the world. It's a lot of human suffering. It's not the dumbed down, watered down version that's presented to like the American public of like, oh, it's just like a land dispute, which is absolutely not what it is. But that's like, I think, how people perceive it because they're not getting enough information.
Rima, because this station, we're based in Chicago, perhaps there are people listening who know you, who follow you on social media. I noticed that you regularly post about the inappropriate devices, equipment that you receive, that your comrades receive, that come with good intentions meant to save people's lives, but that, as you so eloquently put it, don't. My first question, these are not, I'm assuming this is not stuff coming from individuals. These are probably NGOs or organizations. Can you tell a little bit where are the things that you were getting, where are they coming from predominantly? And then we can get into what it is that is missing or lacking.
So, to be honest, I do get stuff from individuals. I have an Amazon wish list. We have a PO box that we use as well. The problem is that, and sometimes people like send packages directly to Ukraine. But the problem is that like a lot of folks are seeing like Chinese made or cheaply made tourniquets or like hemostatic gauze and like, well, I can get 3 of these Chinese tourniquets for the price of 1 Cat 7 North American Rescue tourniquet. So that's gotta be awesome, right? Wrong. Chinese made tourniquets. The problem is that the windlass or the rod of the tourniquet snaps. And that's the whole mechanism of the tourniquet that is the most important part. It's what stops the bleeding from an amputation or a large injury to your limbs. So when that snaps, that strap is not going to help you. There's a lot of misconceptions still that a belt can work as a tourniquet. It can't. It's the windlass or that rod that turns to essentially shut off the artery from being able to bleed. And folks are like, thinking, well, I mean, and I know that the economy, things are tough right now. The problem is that we can't put a price tag on human life. Like we can't Walmart, an issue that is largely a Whole Foods issue. Like you can't, like we can't do it that way. I would love to be able to say we could do it. I've done comparisons of hemostatic gauze that is coming in generic packaging. Now, hemostatic gauze is treated with a certain chemical or agent that stops bleeding 5 times faster than regular gauze. The problem is when people buy these generic Chinese-made gauzes, it's a complete copy. It's almost like those like fake fashion purses. It's the exact same thing of like quick clot combat gauze down to the X-ray line in the gauze. Problem is there's no chemical agent in that hemostatic gauze. So imagine you're a medic. You think, okay, great. I've got hemostatic gauze. I've got this huge bleeder. I got to stop the bleeding. I only have to hold pressure for 3 to 5 minutes because it's hemostatic gauze. Wrong. It's regular gauze with no chemical agent. So like that's not a fun time for a medic to be like, why is this bleeding still happening? It's supposed to be hemostatic gauze because for regular gauze, you have to hold pressure for 7 to 10 minutes.
But wait a minute, though. You're saying
a lot of problems.
You're saying this is my assumption was this was, some charitable organization, a church or an NGO was buying stuff and sending it. You're saying that this is people are seeing your Amazon wish list, which I have, are seeing an item and then going and getting something else, thinking they're doing better?
It has happened.
Oh, my God.
Yes, it has happened. It has happened. We still have this problem. 3 years in, and I have a blog on my Buy Me a Coffee. I write about tactical medicine. I write about real versus fake and the problems that cutting costs is actually costing lives. And like that's, I think folks with no tactical medical understanding are like, well, if this works for like local law enforcement, because I've also heard from people, well, my local fire department said it was okay. Okay, but I didn't say it was okay. And I'm here actually, the local fire department doesn't deal with massive bleeding on a regular basis. So it's not the same thing. And it's a completely different situation when you're in a war zone dealing with catastrophic injuries that are brought on by explosive devices on a constant basis. So it's like, if I'm telling you that like with my certifications and my understanding of, tactical combat medicine, we need this specific item because we've tested Rhino Rescue. We've tested the Chinese tourniquets. unfortunately, because the first year of the war, that's what everyone was sending, and they failed, and a lot of people died as a result. And that's why I won't accept anything other than a Cat 7 tourniquet from donors. And if we get anything that's not a Cat 7, it goes to the training pile, and I train my soldiers with it, because I'm not going to put my soldiers' lives in the hands of a sheep tourniquet instead of a cat tourniquet. I'm not going to do it.
And that's a good point. The care, the trainers, the training you're doing, the people, these are people caring for soldiers. Yeah.
Rima, earlier you mentioned some of the widespread human rights violations that you see up close and personal. You know, the rules of war being violated by Russia, and you seem to suggest that these are intentional tactics being deployed by Putin and Russia to intentionally target civilians. Can you talk to us a little bit about what you're seeing? Because there's a difference between sort of incidental hitting of civilians and the intentional targeting of civilians.
Yeah.
Well, so for example, you know, Russia's always saying, well, we're only hitting military targets.
Right.
Somebody explained to me how a children's hospital is a military target. Ahmedabad Hospital was bombed last summer. It's a children's hospital, children's cancer ward. I was living in Kyiv at the time. It was a mile from where I was living. Like, that was catastrophic. Or apartment buildings. Where is the military target for apartment buildings or grocery stores or any, like, playgrounds, anything that, like, it, and then the terrorizing of the capital city, like, you know, there's Kyiv, there's like other cities like Lviv, you know, Kharkiv. People end up having to basically sleep in the metro or any sort of bomb shelter because it's gotten so bad. So that you're inflicting psychological pain on the population that has nothing to do with the military. They blur the lines completely, because if it was one thing to target the front line, that's one thing. You're in an active war, but you're targeting the cities. You're sending guided aerial bombs. You're sending Shahed drones that sound like Satan's lawnmower. And, like, believe me, that is one sound I'll never forget for the rest of my life. But, like, it's intentional. There's no way it's an accident, because they keep hitting civilian targets over and over and over again.
On a daily basis.
There's no way that it's, daily basis, every couple hours. Like, the eastern towns, it's essentially a constant air raid. There's no, like, normalcy whatsoever.
And the psychological effect you mentioned, I mean, I'm sure that's something you feel, right? You see when it's just, it's hard to measure the impact that can have on a population.
Well, and that's, so, like, when I was on one of my recent missions, medevac missions, we were in a frontline town, and, like, there's little kids still living in these frontline villages, and, you know, little kids who shouldn't know that when I wear my uniform, it means I'm going to work. You know, like, this little girl, like, who was maybe 5 years old, like, she was adorable, cutest thing. She was so cute. She was so sweet. And she's like, well, I know you have to go to work now because you're wearing your uniform. And I was like, why do you know that? You're so little. Like, you shouldn't have to know that. So, like, it's stuff like that breaks my heart, because these kids are growing up. Like, I don't think they've had a normal night's sleep in 3 years. That's a lot for a child. Like, so, like, for me, that's what gets to me more than anything. Or, like, the suffering of the soldiers that come in with their catastrophic injuries, or seeing, like, civilians that have horrible injuries. Like, my friend Eddie, who's from the UK, he was doing humanitarian evacuations out east. And his van was labeled humanitarian evacuation vehicle. Huge letters, couldn't miss it. Russians dropped a bomb on his vehicle that opened up the top like a pop can and severed his arm and leg. Okay? Like, humanitarian targets. They will literally target people, like volunteers evacuating civilians out of these frontline towns. That's the part that sucks, is watching the suffering of, like, people that are trying to help, and then also the civilians that go through the same stuff.
Rima,
sorry.
You are one thing that makes you so effective and remarkable, either in live interviews like this or your posts, is you are so eloquent and clear in your descriptions. And yet I was still finding myself thinking, somehow, for those of us who are not there, it's still so, I don't know, abstract or unreal. And I wonder, and I apologize, it's probably going to catch you off guard, but is there is there an incident or a mission, an action that you carried out recently in the field that you could describe a little bit to paint a picture of what a mission of Rima Ziuraitas looks like?
So it depends on the task. I can speak to one of our medevac missions that was recent. Essentially, it's a lot of it's the weight. So you sit essentially in your adrenaline for hours, especially when you know you need to be going on AVAC, because we get our casualty counts over the radio. So we know from our infantry who's hurt, and we know how bad the injuries are. However, because the drone threat is so bad, we can't go out and get them right away. We have to wait until it's safe enough for us to get them, because they'll target us and they'll target our casualties. The safety risks for medics is exceptionally high. So we're waiting, and we finally get the call to move. So we get in the ammo, we grab our rifles, we have our kit on and everything, and we're ready to go. We get to our site, and essentially we are scanning the sky for any drone in the air, because we are in a very, very close forward position where the drop point is, and it's very precarious for everyone involved. The BMP rolls up, and it's one wheel is blown up because the explosive dropped next to the wheel. So this guy is driving this personnel carrier with one wheel basically in tatters, and makes it to us. We load everyone in, and I've got 3 casualties in my ambo. The one I'm taking care of has a TBI. So he's got a concussion that's pretty bad, and he's just puking. He cannot stop throwing up because he's got a TBI. And essentially, we're speeding out of that evac point because we have to go. If we stay any longer, we risk being spotted. Mm-hmm. So we're hurtling down this road that's got potholes everywhere in this ambulance, and I am trying to put an IV line into a guy that just can't stop throwing up. Well, we're going about 100 to 110 kilometers an hour. That is probably the roughest experience I've had lately, just trying to make sure my casualty is okay. I'm trying to deliver his meds through an IV, and we're trying to stay out of harm's way by just speeding down the road to the stabilization point. It is muggy, hot, miserable, and we're just trying to stabilize all 3 guys enough to get to the next point of care. So that's one type of mission that I've had recently. That's at our stab point.
Truly extraordinary work.
Sorry, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, no. Just saying, absolutely extraordinary work and stressful work. And well, we would love to have you.
Something else.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just saying.
No, please.
Yeah, okay. So this is a good time. Maybe you can tell the audience how to find your Amazon list, how to connect with you, and because I think that can be really valuable. Both your blog, but also your Amazon list. How can people stay connected with you,
or otherwise where to donate?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So largely, I have a pretty decent presence on Twitter. That's where all of my information's at. It's pinned to my Twitter account. On my wall, it's got my Buy Me a Coffee, PayPal, and my Amazon wish list. Those are all 3 of the main ways to help out. All of those either contribute with physical donations. If you want to support the journey, it goes towards my teaching. It goes towards me supporting our soldiers and making sure they have good IFACs. Or it'll contribute to, something silly like a pizza party at the end of our CLS course so that, the guys can celebrate their passing the course with a pizza party. We try to keep morale high in this place as much as possible. So it's stuff like that. Everything gets stretched and goes a long way with everything that anybody gives. I've always said, even if you just share a post, you've now, given information about something that maybe someone else didn't know about. So it doesn't always have to be monetary. It can be spreading the word about Ukraine too. And most of my political screaming happens on Twitter as well. So you'll hear me screaming a lot about, the stupid stuff that happens, regarding Ukraine or just American politics, because I can't help myself. So That's where you can find me for the most part.
So that.
And I have an educational account about tactical medicine on Instagram. Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah. Can you tell us what that one is so people could search it and find you?
So it's Rima Med UA.
RIMAMEDUA.
MEDUA.
On Instagram. Yep. Great.
And Twitter.
And if you go to that Amazon gift list, folks, do like I did and buy the ones that Rima has put on there. Otherwise, you are really not helping. It's a little more expensive and there'll be fewer of them. But guess what? They'll work. Rima, again,
it does work. My
heart goes out to you. You're doing remarkable work. Do take care of yourself. Watch after Rima Ziuraitas because she matters too.
Thank you so much, Rima. This has been wonderful.
No worries. Thanks, guys. It's as always, it's a pleasure. And anytime, I'm always around for the most part. If I've got a steady internet connection, I'm happy to talk to y'all.
You're the best. We need to take a short break. You are listening to The Big Picture with Edwin Eisendrath on WCPT.
You're looking at The Big Picture with Edwin Eisendrath on WCPT 820.
Welcome back to The Big Picture with Edwin Eisendrath. I am Bill Muck, and I'm joined by Joel Ostrow. Before we get to our next guest, let me remind everybody that tomorrow on Out Chicago, Scott Duff and Alan Miller will be joined by Illinois State Senator Mike Simmons, Democratic candidate for Congress in the 9th District of Illinois. Sasha Velour, gender-fluid drag queen and visual artist performing the Big Reveal live show at Steppenwolf on August 1st through the 3rd. And Brooke Eden, country artist performing August 9th at North Halstead Market Days, Out Chicago, Sundays from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. On WCPT 820. We are so excited to chat with our next guest, Kathy Towen, who is the chair of the Indivisible Chicago Alliance. Many of you will know Indivisible's Work Well, launched in January 2017. Indivisible Chicago is a progressive organization of activists and coalition of neighborhood chapters throughout the Chicagoland area, representing nearly 40,000 members. And they describe their purpose as engaging, quote, with public servants to create a just society by promoting progressive values and grassroots engagement. So we're so happy that you've taken some time to talk with us today. Welcome, Kathy, to WCPT.
Thanks. It's great to be here.
So let's start with sort of the simple, basic question. Why don't you tell us a little about your organization, yourself, and the work that you're doing with Indivisible Chicago?
Sure. You did a great little summary there at the outset, but as you indicated, Indivisible Chicago has been around since 2017, since the 2017 election, and represents, as you said, tens of thousands, well over 40,000 Chicagoans who are horrified by the policies and tactics of the Trump administration and are actively working and networking to resist that. I would say we work on a lot of different fronts, and we can talk about all of those in the next little while here, both in terms of demonstrating resistance and working on elections and many other things. I guess I should note that we have seen enormous growth in interest in Indivisible and participation in our activities in 2025. Not surprising, but that has come both in the form of new neighborhood-based chapters in Chicago and the suburbs, as well as many, many more individuals signing up with us to actively engage in a range of activities.
That's great. One of the things I find most really sort of fascinating and exciting about Indivisible is the focus on the local. So there's the national organization, but it does seem like a lot of the really important work is happening at the local level, and that the national organization is encouraging that. Like even in, the documents, they say, hey, start up a chapter, do it yourself, don't ask for permission. Talk to us about why the local is so important for this movement.
Sure. So Indivisible is built on the local groups. I mean, I think that was from the get-go, the purpose of Indivisible was to have local groups, which sprung up all over the country and are, as I was just saying, are springing up all over the country at an enormous rate now, today. Yeah. The point of this work is to have local organizations who can act in their own communities, who can build community in their, where they are, and all action is, even national action is local action, right? It has to happen everywhere. And the beauty of Indivisible as an organization is that those organizations both, coordinate nationally on mobilizations and some big picture strategies, but also are able to focus and work on individual issues in their communities, threats and opportunities, pressuring their own elected officials, can really focus on local action.
I love in the Practical Guide to Democracy that, this document, which our listeners should go check out. I was trying to find what it says, but the document says, quote, don't wait for orders and don't ask for permission. If you're a leader in this movement. I think that's such a fascinating way. And it's empowering because I think in this moment, it's easy to feel disillusioned, to just be overwhelmed. And I like this sense of empowerment. Like, hey, if you want to make a difference, do it. Just go get started.
Absolutely. And that's why that is why there's such a huge network, and so many people engaged. And here in Chicago, we have both the Indivisible Chicago Alliance, which brings together chapters from around the city of Chicago and suburban areas, as well as individuals who are outside of specific chapter areas. But those chapters are engaged in a whole range of both local issues and, work on our large-scale mobilizations and election work. And they are building community and recruiting new folks, every day.
Kathy, I want to make this abundantly clear, and I mean it sincerely. So much respect for the work that you are doing and the thousands of people around the country like you are doing to organize at the local level. It is essential, as you describe. It is important. It is really the linchpin and hope for the future of hopes for democracy to survive in this country. So this is not a but or an or. Two things can be true at the same time. This is an and. And anyone who has heard me on this station, including the last time I was on, my head explodes with frustration as I describe it, that we need protest that's not for a couple hours on a convenient Saturday. If we're going to rescue this democracy, it has to start on a Monday, has to be people sustained in the streets in a general strike kind of action. Governor Pritzker called for this in a speech in New Hampshire back in March. I don't see any sign of it. I don't even see a wave building towards that. Do you disagree with the statement, or do you disagree with the assessment? What do you see happening on that kind of scale, and what's your response to my frustration?
Well, we all want more, and we want more faster and more all the time, right? So I would just start by saying what has been accomplished by nationally coordinated mobilization efforts to date is pretty remarkable, and at this moment, unprecedented it's maybe unprecedented in U.S. at least recent history, and so I don't want to. We have done an enormous amount, right? 3.5 million, 4 million people, more than that, were activated on No King's Day. Mm-hmm. That is, that is huge in our world here, and I agree with you. It has to be sustained. It has to grow. That is work. That is work that has to be done, not just nationally, but in all those places where people need to activate more people, where people need to, keep up recruitment efforts, and then we need national coordination of more and more efforts. I think that is happening. There's a lot of discussion of how the next steps go, the stages go. There will be, subsequent large mobilizations. What are we building to, mass resistance in a more concrete way? I personally hope so. And folks are working to figure out how to make that happen. But, it is not,
I guess
it is a big job.
It's a big job. I do wonder, my flippant comment, and I think I said this to Joan, is when the price of bread goes up in France, the people of France pour into the streets until the government changes. When the president of South Korea tries to institute martial law, the people of South Korea poured into the streets until he was gone. Why is it harder here, do you think? Like, what's your, as an activist, as a leader in the activist movement, what makes it so hard for Americans to defend their democracy? I guess is the question I'm asking. Like, what have you experienced?
What's going to motivate us? Yeah.
Yeah, like if it hasn't happened yet, what's going to get us into the streets?
And what is your answer to that question? Because, I think
Hey, I asked the questions here. That's my answer.
Yeah, well, we're getting a lot of people in the streets. And yes, we need more people in the streets. And I think, part of it is we don't have the same heritage of that. I mean, obviously we have the civil rights movement. We have, particular movements that have created real change.
It's the right of the people to alter, abolish, and institute new, right?
Yeah, we don't have the same shared ethos, I would say, of protest that goes broad. This has to be bigger than anything that's happened in the United States before. It already is. It just needs to get bigger, So I think it's complicated, right? We have the media forces that are trying to confuse us.
Yes.
They're not helping give a clear picture of what's going on. I think there are different things that motivate different people. So the question of the price of bread, I mean, if prices continue to go up and the tariffs and Medicaid cuts and all of that begin to be felt, I think that's one set of things that will mobilize people. I think, I hope that the horror of kidnapping people off the street and putting them in concentration camps, which Americans are becoming fairly horrified about, will also begin a different, pathway for getting more people active. So I think there's going to be a bunch of pathways that are going to motivate.
And that's probably what it takes, too, is it's not just, it's got to be a widespread movement mobilizing and protest, but also sit-ins. And also, it probably has to take a variety of forms. Yeah. I'm curious to pick your brain about the concept of nonviolence, because when you look at your documents and the national documents, it's a centerpiece of the organization that the protest movement has to be nonviolent. And there's some really powerful scholarship backing that up to say the most effective protest movements, Eric Chenoweth and others write about this, are the ones that are nonviolent. Can you talk to us a little bit about why you all see that as so important, that these movements are sustained and nonviolent?
Sure. First of all, I mean, we are deeply committed to nonviolence, right? And that is both a moral stance and a practical stance. And as you said, the effective movements, sustained movements for change have been nonviolent. we believe with our national organization that it's absolutely critical, that it's counterproductive, and that we will do everything possible to ensure that everything we do is nonviolent. Violent movements do not bring about the effective and stable change that we need to see. It's not going to get us anywhere that we need to go.
I actually did have an answer to when you asked what the answer was, but I'm going to give my answer as a question. I'm curious what your attitude, comments are, your thoughts are about those who would, I guess, former leaders, the names, the Clintons, Kennedys, Obamas, Bushes, even Cheneys and others who are largely silent and inactive is my perception, because those successful movements you described, we could all name the leaders, whether it's Gandhi or Havel or Walesa, right? We're leaderless, it seems, in the opposition right now. And I don't mean a presidential candidate, because if all of those folks together put together a statement, we're taken to the streets at 10 a.m. on Monday, I would imagine that a lot of organizations beyond Indivisible would respond to that call and mobilize. I'm curious your thoughts on that, and your thoughts on the high-level leadership and how they are performing.
Well, I don't disagree that we need all of the leaders that we have need to be stronger, more coordinated, more strategic, louder. All of those things are true, right? Everything from the Congress capitulating its power on the original budget bill to I think silence on the part of some of those prior leaders that you described. All of those things are needed. I tend not to, in the work that I do, focus my energies on that, because I think the things that none of that can also happen alone. So these are chicken and egg things, perhaps, but we have to mobilize all of us. I feel like I am also profoundly disappointed in, so much of our leadership, and it leads me to the conclusion that we are the people that will save us.
Fair.
And, it's not obviously, every day we see another capitulation, right? Mm-hmm. Whether it's CBS or, Columbia University or whoever it is. And we see this across the board. So it's not, yes, it's all those leaders that you spoke of. It's all those institutions. It's the initial law firms that also capitulated. So, we need both to, we need to understand that, for better or worse, a large part of this burden is on all of us. And also that we need to, part of our job is to push those leaders to be leaders, whether it's the law firms or the universities or the politicians. All of them.
It's all of it, yeah.
Yeah, all pushing at the same time. You mentioned those groups that the Trump administration and Trump himself has been targeting, and your success, the organizational success, has made you a bit of a target, where Trump is now starting to target you. Is the organization thinking about how to respond to that when the administration becomes more forceful coming at you and tries to undermine the tactics? How do you evolve, or are you guys thinking about those kind of approaches and inevitability of the Trump administration trying to target and undermine your efforts?
the Trump administration is trying to target and undermine all efforts in opposition to them. So the answer is yes. We think about those things. We think about, what problems that could happen and what we could do, if we need to be doing things to protect ourselves. But it doesn't change anything that we do on a day-to-day basis, in the world, and nor should it. So I don't. We all need to be strategic, and we all need to understand what we're up against, but that, that shouldn't constrain us.
Well, absolutely.
And we have not let it. It has not constrained us,
Well, that's important because I think there's a real psychological component to your work, right? As I mentioned earlier, like you empower people when there's somebody you can turn to say, let's help organize, let's move together. That can be very, very effective. And I think sometimes we don't appreciate the psychological role that all of this plays, right? That gets us out of the malaise and feeling helpless, right? It's organizations, local chapters that allow us to feel empowered and actually become agents in that change.
Right. I mean, this sounds simple, but it's absolutely true, right? It is working together that makes us powerful. It is working together that makes us safer. It is working together that makes us more effective. And it's working together that keeps us able to keep up the work, right? To boost our own energies. So all of those things, the solution is more of us working together in community and solidarity and action.
Kathy, I've got a related question. It kind of overlaps a little bit, but it's in the direction of our discussion earlier in the show about the ICE actions in the country. What I like to call the American Fascist Party, MAGA, has its private Gestapo with unidentified, masked agents who are seizing citizens and non-citizens alike and disappearing them into, as you put it, concentration camps. I asked our prior guest if this was not kidnapping. I still see it as kidnapping or illegal rendition when they're putting them, in detention centers outside the country. We see police presence, which is essentially directed at keeping the protesters away rather than arresting the kidnappers. And as a question of strategy, another frustration I've had is, instead of protesters outside the courthouses, I want the protesters at police headquarters, at the mayor's office, demanding that those who are there to serve and protect us by arresting the kidnappers. Has there been any discussion with an indivisible about that and that strategy of being at the immigration courts rather than protesting at say the police headquarters and police stations or demanding police do their job?
So we just participated this week in an effort that's ongoing to demand that our local officials close down the Bridgeview detention facility, which is a horrible place. It's a place that was not designed to hold people, and it is currently holding people for, who knows how long, actually. But and our elected officials have been unable to get inside. So that's an example. That's a call on the Kwame Raoul and the Cook County State's Attorney to act to close it down. I do agree that there need to be local targeted actions where there are local enforcement actions that can be taken. Yeah. Obviously, we do a lot because we are a sanctuary place, but agree that continuing to strategize about what local actions are possible. The other thing, just to on a tangent to that, is that we also are encouraging our members and individuals to become, conversant in what rapid response looks like, what reacting to seeing things on the street looks like, and encouraging folks to where they can and are able to participate in local rapid response networks. We do have a Zoom orientation session to that going on August 6th.
Great.
So that's another kind of place that's important. It's critically important while we're doing the other visible resistance acts to also be working where we can to mitigate or address or resist the harms being done.
And that's been quite visible. I see that everywhere. The rapid response instruction, even on social media,
right.
the 10 steps to take if you see something.
Which is great.
It's been fantastic.
Along those lines, in like the minute we've got left, Kathy, what do people need to know? How can they get involved? What's coming up? Tell us what we should be doing.
Thank you for asking. So the first thing I would say is go to indivisibleschicago.com. And please sign up. If you sign up with us, you can sign up for our daily actions that tell you what's going on and what you can do. We also will send you emails, but we don't send them. We will not inundate your inbox.
You're not Act Blue.
But we will send you, critical times, giving you frameworks for what you can do and what's coming up. And so we urge you to do that. And then also on our website are upcoming activities that you can sign up for. We are organizing large and small resistance activities. We are doing the work on immigration that we just talked about. We are our chapters have all kinds of local activities going on. We will be starting in the fall to train up folks for canvassing operations and election work, which will begin not too long after that. We focus on Wisconsin and Michigan, key swing states where flipping the House, where there are key races that will help flip the House. And then we also keep demanding that our elected leaders step up and be effective and strategic and aggressive in resisting. So those are all the kind of things we do in various ways, and you can find out more about all of that by going to our website, seeing our activities there, but really signing up to get ongoing information from us about what's going on.
Thank you for everything you're doing.
Yes. A wonderful call to action.
IndivisiblesChicago.com.
Yeah. We've been speaking with Kathy Tolan, chair of the Indivisible Chicago Alliance. Thank you so much, Kathy. We really appreciate your time.
Keep it up.
Great to be here. Thanks.
You bet. We're going to take a little break, and we come back. We will open up those phone lines to hear your perspective. So we'll be right back on WCPT.
Edwin Eisendrath is taking your calls now at 773-763-9278. The Big Picture is on now. WCPT 820.
Welcome back. I'm Joel Ostrow here with Bill Muck, and we are opening the phone lines now to talk about anything we've talked about or whatever you wish to talk about. The Credo mobile phone and text line is 773-763-9278. Credo Mobile, a progressive phone company that is better for all people and the planet. Visit credomobile.com.
Well, Joel, those are some really fascinating conversations. We talked about ICE. We talked about Ukraine. We got a little bit of a protest movement. I feel fulfilled. Good conversation. So
let's see what our listeners have to say.
Paul, should we start with Jim from Chicago? Hey, Jim, welcome to the show. How are you?
Pretty good. I wish things were more tranquil, but if wishes were horses, beggars would ride. But what I think about today is the first impeachment of Trump, and harken back to the perfect phone call to Zelensky. But what really impressed me was the way they abused our career diplomat and intelligence agency. So going forward with this deep state theory, all I can think of, can you imagine what their interview, what their quiz would be from Stephen Miller, an intelligence worker or a diplomat going forward, and how absolutely vital it is to the future of America. But once they get their grimy hands on it, God only knows what will happen. And the other thing real quick is that you got callers, is anybody who votes Republican has been in one of these hair-raising plane riots over the last 3 weeks. Yeah. It's got to be out of their mind. If I disembark from a plane, the last one was 20 seconds of terror. The Afrikaners have cut with impunity, with no reasoning behind any of it. But that's where we stand today. And a great show, guys, and thanks for taking my call. Thank you.
Thanks for calling in, Jim. Joel, he brought up the decimation of the State Department, and I don't think this is it's getting some attention, but
not nearly
maybe
enough.
You could talk a little bit about why that's so significant. Everybody thinks about the Defense Department. Oh, add more military. That's what you got to do. But what happens when you cut thousands of people from the State Department? What's the impact there?
Yeah, well, we're talking about the diplomatic corps.
Yes, yeah.
We lose our ability to engage with others to solve critical problems that have eventually come back to harm us. If we're talking about foreign aid, we're talking about something like 0.2% of our annual budget.
Yeah.
And anyone you speak to who has been involved, whether it's the delivery of humanitarian aid or if it's medical services, particularly the relief of HIV/AIDS on the continent of Africa, which, by the way, was really spearheaded by, at the time, anyone listening to this station would have thought was the most extremist right-wing president in history, George W. Bush. The benefits that the good thinking, the good services, the what would it be? The feelings about the United States around the world.
Soft power, right?
Soft power is so important, and we just say, no, we don't need all that. And even hypocrites like Lindsey Graham, and Marco Rubio would. Were outraged at the thought of it before and are now leading the effort to destroy it, and really it undermines our influence around the world. That's my perspective. I don't know.
Well, you highlight both the moral and the strategic interest, right?
Yeah.
I mean, PEPFAR and the funding for HIV/AIDS, like 25 million lives? It was something unbelievable for a tiny cost. And the data's coming in already. I mean, it sounds like tens of thousands have already died because of the cutting of that. And that was goodwill, soft power. People look to the United States as a global leader. But
and
also,
it costs us nothing.
Right, nothing. And the strategic interest, also cutting back at the State Department. China is obviously a rising power challenge to the United States. You're now cutting back the workforce that's out there, building bridges with all of these countries, and now you're no longer having those conversations. I think it's an underreported story, and it's going to have a generational impact.
Look, the international relations theory of realism, right?
Yes.
This contributed to our power in every corner of the planet, and we've decided we don't want it anymore. Like, nobody can explain this from a theory perspective other than this is the goal of fascism, right? They create chaos to consolidate personal control and extract wealth for themselves. It has nothing to do about the country.
It's bad foreign policy, right? And one of the things we can say is that China is thrilled that we're doing all of these things. Yeah. All right, who's up next?
How about Paul from Seattle?
Let's do it. Hey, Paul, welcome.
Hi, Paul.
Thank you. Well, the interview with your guest, the ICE officer, former ICE officer, left me feeling more uneasy than ever. Honestly, because
we did our job.
Yes.
Well, I wish I could have asked him some questions. All I'm saying is that, okay, so we start with a stop. Reasonable cause or probable cause and reasonable suspicion is only going to be determined once you're in custody. Is only going to be determined when you can get in front of a judge as to whether that was reasonable suspicion and probable cause. So if somebody who's unidentified is frisking me and maybe taking my wallet and ID and my phone and ditching it, and I have and then saying this person doesn't even have any identification. Because you took it and threw it in the lake. That's a real big. When you're disappearing somebody, that's what you can do. The other thing is, what was really unclear is it says, okay, ICE officers if they're enforcing the law or this person is suspected of a crime, well, what kind of crime? More than 90% of criminal law is state law, and the federal government does not have a purview in enforcing state law, just as the states. And I don't think when we mentioned sanctuary cities, the cities are not compelled. And I'll give you two cases. Way back in 1858, Craig versus Pennsylvania, the court ruled that the states don't have to enforce federal law. if they don't want to. And in 2012, in Arizona versus the United States, an immigration thing said that the states may not enforce federal law, even if they want to. So, that's really unclear. But the thing is, an ICE officer doesn't have any jurisdiction to enforce state laws, such as you committed an assault or something like that. That's not their purview. And yet that's what's being talked about when you hear about, this person was a criminal. Even if it's murder is state law. The only crimes that the federal government can enforce are crimes against the federal government. So it's very dubious as to what kind of crimes. There really aren't very many, comparatively speaking, federal crimes that ICE officers would be out enforcing. That's what left me feeling really, and the other thing is that the supremacy clause doesn't mean that federal law supersedes state law. That is constitutional and valid state laws. The federal government can't just say, well, we're walking in here and our law is what matters. No, that's not true. The courts have not upheld that. As a matter of fact, the federal government gets a crack at the individual after state proceedings are finished. And that's why that judge in Wisconsin who was arrested by ICE, she was in the midst of criminal proceedings with a defendant, an undocumented defendant. That takes precedent over civil administrative immigration law. This has all gotten really twisted out of shape, and I think the only thing we agree on is the Supreme Court isn't helping. We have
no, of course not.
And well, if you take a look at Federalist 78 about how the judiciary cannot be a threat to liberty unless it says it happens to ally with one of the other branches of the federal government, either or both, and that's where we are, is the judiciary has become a part of the politics of the executive and the Congress at this point.
Well, let's thank you for your call. Let's respond to some of this. I would say, Bill, well, again, we get to the two things can be true at the same time. Right. Certainly when it comes to probable cause or reasonable suspicion, it is in fact the job of police or federal law enforcement when there's probable cause or reasonable suspicion to detain and interview, investigate. That is certainly legitimate. What Reed Bible was, the former ICE supervisor, was talking about was this: what's happening now is mass, basically profiling, random, just snatching people
without warrants,
without information. It's like that person's brown, we're going to take them, and that is what. So that's the mass sort of random stuff. But certainly the more specific, when there is probable cause or reasonable suspicion that someone has engaged in a crime, that's legitimate, but you don't disappear them for weeks.
There's still due process involved in all of that, right?
Correct.
And you can't send people off to foreign countries without going through that process. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, that was the main response. I think.
Yeah, the other interesting issue is sort of this federal-state divide. Yeah. And Joel, I remember a time when conservatives cared about state rights, and we've seen that debate now flipped, where you have conservative red states now saying we want all of that power vested with the federal government, and we're willing to, especially if it's a blue state, those rights are no longer as significant as what we once thought they were.
There was this really interesting, I can't remember if it was a social media post by someone that I knew or if it was an academic, but describing the attitudes of neo-fascists in power, which is what the MAGA movement certainly is. I don't call them the Republican Party anymore because that party's gone. But MAGA, they approve of anything that in which they are telling others what to do. Yeah. And they oppose anything that tries to tell them what to do or what they can't do. Yeah. So if it's the state telling women that they can't have abortion, they're for that, right?
Gun rights.
But if it's the state saying, hey, we want to have, maybe you have to have a permit to have a gun, that's telling them what to do, and they refuse that.
Absolutely.
So it's not about state rights, it's about control.
Absolutely. And there's no longer a grounding in an ideological position anymore. So much of it is dependent upon the whims of Trump. When I think about this, we see this
power and what's going to make them money.
Yes, right. I mean, the Supreme Court telling Joe Biden that he can't forgive aid, but Donald Trump can destroy the Department of Education, right?
Makes no sense.
Or there should be some more ideological consistency there. No, you're spot on there. So, yeah, thanks, Paul. Thanks for the thoughts there. Let's see, who's up next? Here, Joel, you can see better than I can.
How about Dave from Hoffman Estates?
Hey, Dave, welcome to the show.
Hey, Professor Ostrow, Professor Muck. I'm going to do a little bit kind of like of history rhyming itself right now when it comes to Ukraine. Now, I forget which one of you is more of the expert on Russia. If it was you, Professor Muck, or...
We both do it, but Professor Ostrow's probably got me a little bit on that front.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, did you guys ever cover or remember the Winter War of 1939 to 1940, where Russia attacked Finland?
Yeah.
And they underestimated the Finnish resistance to take over the country. They thought all they had to do was raise their voice a little bit, and the Finns would obey, or fire one shot, and the Finns would put their hands up. Well, they got a bit more than they expected, because for 105 days, from 39 to 40, one of the toughest campaigns of the pre-World War II era was fought. It wasn't until 1970 that Khrushchev's memoirs revealed the loss of 1 million Russian lives in that Winter War. And that we're about where they're at now at Ukraine with 3 years, Mark.
Yep.
About 1 million casualties in that. And a lot of the game is the same. Russia tried to flood them with people.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's nothing new about this. You're absolutely right, Dave. I mean, the underestimation of Japan and the Russo-Japanese War brought down the Tsars ultimately and led to the communist. You're right about Finland, and Stalin underestimated the Nazis. That Russia again in Chechnya completely overestimated their own power and underestimated the power of the Chechens there. And now in Ukraine, this is a pathology of Russian military adventurism that goes back a long, long time.
How long do you think Russia can keep this up? Because it seems like every 6 months there's a different view, whether we're in a stalemate or whether Russia's winning, whether Ukraine is winning. Is this something? Do you think Putin has the appetite for years more of this, or is he going to look for a solution? I don't get the sense that he's, at this point, interested in any sort of diplomatic ceasefire. But what's your read of all of this? No, because
he doesn't believe that the United States has any interest in continuing the kind of assistance to Ukraine that would enable Ukraine to continue to mount a defense. But Europe does have that interest, and perhaps this new arrangement will help. We were talking about this before we went on air, Bill. Really what has enabled Russia to continue to fight on has been its ability to skirt the sanctions regime. And since Trump's come to power, that ability has increased exponentially. During the Biden years, when the sanctions were first imposed, the strict sanctions with something like 75 other countries in our coalition, the Biden administration issued over 800 executive orders. Essentially, it requires day-to-day intelligence work, coordination among the Treasury Department, Commerce Department, CIA, NSA, and FBI to identify these shell companies that spring up to try to continue to skirt the sanctions and sell oil, in particular oil and gas, to those who would buy it. And so those sanctions would target those entities and anyone who would do business with those.
That's really fascinating.
There's not been a single updated sanction since January 21st, and that has enabled these shell companies to spring up everywhere, and Russia is then profiting off of the sale of its oil and gas.
A critical lifeline to them to fuel
funds
absolutely.
Funds their military and their ability to continue to produce weapons. weapons, not so much to get the components, so their weapons are less guided, less precise, but they can still make things that go boom, and they can produce those drones, the Shahed drones, that are no good if Ukraine had the air defenses, but when they send thousands and thousands a night, some are going to get through. And they can continue to fund that because those things are pretty cheap.
You just keep throwing technology and human beings at the conflict, and it allows them to maintain and have little gains here or there.
And North Korea seems content to send Russia more cannon fodder to do that work. So,
well, that's a beneficial relationship for both of them as well. Yeah. Dave, any other thoughts on Russia and Ukraine?
Real quick, so you can get to others, that sadly, I think they may have to do what Finland ended up doing. They had to give up 11% of their country, the eastern, the Karelia, and I got a feeling that Ukraine's gonna end up giving the Donbass and that area before it's all said and done, because they're not universal soldiers. They're not producing more. I mean, they got to be, a lot of casualties too, and then with the monies and that, but. They got just as much soul and heart as the Finns had, but I don't know. But then, like you're saying, they're bringing in the North Koreans now too.
Well, and Putin's designs certainly extend far beyond Crimea and Donetsk. So
yes, and without the political will of the United States, I think you're right. There's got to be the solution is not going to be Ukraine getting all of its territory back, getting Crimea back. I mean that is what international law would demand. That's right. But I think the best thing you could do is some sort of ceasefire and kick that down the road. I mean that's without U.S. leadership, it's very, very unlikely.
That's right. Yeah. We do have phone lines open still. 773-763-9278. Please call in.
Yes. Thanks so much for calling in, Dave. I think we've got, let's see, our next caller is Brian wants to chat about immigration. Hey, Brian, welcome to WCPT.
Hey, good afternoon. I'm an independent. I would put myself as a centrist politically. And I wanted to point out how Trump is a monstrous psychopath, and I never voted for him. But
that's a good qualifier.
The Democratic Party isn't really gaining in popularity, and I think they need to re-examine their positions on many issues, especially immigration. The party line is immigration is nothing but good. I disagree with that. I think immigration needs to be controlled. It needs to be limited. We need to openly discuss what the limits need to be, and we need to discuss how we're going to punish employers who violate the law and hire people here illegally. And, this is common sense things. But if you look, there's affordability crisis here in America now. Affordable housing is scarce in most of our desirable metro areas. People have a harder time earning an income to make a basic standard of living. So how does having an uncontrolled immigration flow help those two problems? I don't think they do. I think they make them both worse. And that's obvious to most common sense Americans. So the Democrats need to reevaluate and say, hey, we can't take everybody. There has to be limits. There has to be rules. And if you look at, people that have immigrated by overstaying their visa, so they weren't undocumented, they just are now breaking the law. People who cross the border illegally, essentially they're cutting the line. We let them cut the line, flow into the country, establish a life, and then we say, oh, well, what can we do? Let's just make them citizens. So what does that tell the world? It tells the world, ignore the rules, just get your butt into the United States, and I'll let you stay, which is counterproductive. I think our politics need to be focused on working-class Americans. Immigrants come second to working-class Americans. Because if you have an out-of-control immigration system, what you have is a de facto deregulated labor market, which is what we've had for 30, 40 years. And both parties had just looked the other way because everybody's making a lot of money. is the main reason.
Bill, why don't you give us a chance to respond to this? We get your point here.
Brian, I think you raised an interesting question, right? And I think there's no doubt that the Democratic Party is a little bit on its heels in terms of how to handle the issue of immigration. I will say, like, it was last week, Bernie Sanders came out and did make a comment to say that, Democrats have to be more thoughtful about immigration reform and think about that. And I think, there certainly are some criticisms. I would say the Democratic Party acknowledges the complexity of immigration, and maybe Republicans offer more sort of populist solutions to those. Long term, there are real reasons for having some sort of reform. I think you have to acknowledge the benefits. Earlier, we talked about the benefits of an open immigration policy and finding the balance between what's the right amount of individuals coming in versus managing borders. But it certainly, I see the difference between there's sort of the politics of it, but then there's also the national interest. What's really a good policy? I don't know, Joel. How do you assess where the Democrats are?
I see it entirely differently. Yeah? I think the Democrats' problem is a shocker messaging.
Yeah,
the notion that anyone. Any elected official, anyone in any position of authority in this country, now or ever, has supported unlimited immigration is insane and suggests you've been listening to propaganda from the wrong media.
Look at Barack Obama, who deported tons
more than anyone until now. The Democratic Party supports immigration because the Democratic Party supports a strong and thriving economy. Yeah. And if you look at actual data, every time that immigration has increased in this country, our economy has expanded. The caller talked about affordability. Do you think the price of, oranges or tomatoes or lettuce is going to go down if Bill Muck is picking the lettuce?
I'm not a very good picker.
No, you're not good and you're not cheap.
Right, right.
I see that shirt you're wearing. Immigration is the engine of this economy. It is also, yes, it's the message that the United States of America has sent to the world. We are the land of freedom and opportunity. Mm-hmm. Yes, people come into this country legally and illegally. The overwhelming majority want to be legal. The overwhelming majority apply for asylum. And if they don't qualify for it, then they get deported. Mm-hmm. The Democratic Party supported the most restrictive immigration bill in this country's history. And it was the Republicans that rejected it. Yeah. So it's really a straw man that kind of enrages me because it's absurd notion that any Democrat has ever supported open
more of a
borders.
Messaging problem than anything.
It's more messaging.
Actually, Brian, we have to. We've got quick, and then we got to get to one more caller.
Okay, tell me a leading Democrat that says we need to control the level of immigration. They say they don't talk about it. They focus on how we're a nation of immigrants. That means we should take as many as possible.
That doesn't mean that.
It's this working economy has created billionaires, and half the people in the country can't afford their rent and can't come up with $400 tomorrow.
I love tomatoes, but I don't eat as many as possible.
Yeah. Thanks so much for the call, Brian. We appreciate the perspective. I think we got time to sneak one more caller in. Roosevelt, welcome to WCPT. Good to chat with you.
How you doing? Thank you for taking my call.
Yes.
Thank you for calling.
Gentlemen. Question is short and right to the point. I don't know which one is worse, Florida or Texas, but do you think that my question was, where do you think that they're flying some of these people that they were holding in Alligator, Alcatraz? I hate to use those two words, but I'm sorry, that's the only thing that I could do right now at the top of my head. And do you think there will be more Alligator Alcatrazes, such as in Texas or in other states, Republican states?
My answer is follow the money. We got to find out which corporate entity, which oligarch is profiting off of that, and see what their connections are, because I would anticipate that there will be more. I don't know how you feel about that.
I think the same thing, unless there is some sort of moral outrage. I mean, think about, when the issue of Trump separating families, that actually caused a little bit of change in policy. But I don't know if the country's in that sort of place right now. Yeah. And I don't think Trump is as concerned by pushback. So
correct.
I fully anticipate we're going to see more of these. And DeSantis is actually campaigning on this. It's he's not hiding this. No. He's advertising. Kristi Noema's down there taking pictures. Yeah. So I think they're all in, which would suggest I think we're going to see more and more of these. We're going to see more until the people. Until we occupy the country, as opposed to just Wall Street, that's the only thing I see as the hope, is that Occupy, like, people need to be camping out in the streets and shutting down the economy, because that's what's going to hit those in power where it hurts. No, until we do that, until we pour into the streets and stay in the streets, not on a convenient Saturday, as I put it. It gets back to your question earlier about what's going to motivate Americans to get out, because this should. There's a whole host of things.
There's a whole host of things this should,
right? Mm-hmm. This idea that we're creating these and celebrating these camps and the conditions of which are awful. And I think it's a stain on the country that we don't push back more forcefully against it.
I agree.
Yeah,
Bill, it's been a lot of fun.
This has been a ton of fun, Joel. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much, Paul.
Paul, thank you.
Yes.
Even though you're a Sox fan.
Yeah. Thank you for WCPT for the opportunity to do this. And
thank you so much.
Yes, tune in next time or next week for Edwin Eisendrath and the Big Picture. Thank you so much.
Thank you.